Great. Thank you very much, Michelle. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Good morning and welcome to our meeting of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District Governing Board. We have board members participating in person and on Zoom. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation on Zoom and webcast. Before we begin, here are some of the important guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. Please silence your other communication devices, such as your phones. That will ensure that we do not hear any feedback that can interrupt the meeting. During the meeting, all public participants, except for board members and district staff, will be placed on mute by the host. Public members will not be able to mute or unmute manually. Only the board members and staff will be visible on Zoom. Audio for members of the public will be unmuted once they are recognized to make a public comment. After each agenda item, the chair will announce public comment. The clerk will recognize any public attendee who has indicated they wish to speak. So I just want you to know there is always a slight delay here in the Modesto area. We have not got high-speed internet in Stanislaus County yet, so bear with me. Just give us a little forbearance on how we operate. You'll hear a delay from time to time. So with that, if you could call the roll, Michelle.
Mr. Bessinger?
Here.
Mr. Chiesa?
Here.
Mr. Couch? I believe Mr. Couch is on. I do see him on Zoom.
I'm here.
Ms. Fugazi? Thank you. Ms. Fugazi?
Present.
Ms. Lewis?
Here.
Mr. Mendez?
I'm here.
Dr. Pacheco-Werner?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Pereira?
Hello.
Mr. Peterson? Mr. Preciado?
Here.
Mr. Rickman? Dr. Sheriff?
Here.
Ms. Shucklian? Mr. Wheeler?
I think I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. Reyes? Through the chair, we have a quorum.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask everyone to please stand. I'm going to ask Member Lewis if she would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
My pleasure. Ready? Salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Great. Okay. Item number 4 is approval of consent calendar, items 15 through 24.
Perfect. Any board members have any comments, want to pull any items?
Move to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Anyone from the public that wants to comment on any item?
Through the chair, do we have any public comment in Central? Looks like we do not, and I do not see public comment on Zoom. Is there any public comment in the North?
No public comment in the North.
Is there any public comment in the South?
We have no members of the public in the South.
Thank you. Through the chair, there's no public comment on this item.
Perfect. All right, you can call the roll. Right, call for a vote.
Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Yes.
Mr. Couch? Mr. Couch, can you hear me? I'll come back. Ms. Fugazi?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco-Werner?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank
Sorry.
you. We'll move on to the next item, public comment. This time is made available to comment from the public on matters within the board's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda. It is requested that no comments be made during this period on items on the agenda. The public may make comments for each board agenda item during the time allowed for public comment on that item. Attention is called to the fact that the board is prohibited by law from taking action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda. If you are participating by Zoom video conference, please press the raise hand button on the participants list so that you may be recognized to speak. If you are participating on Zoom audio conference, please press *9 so that you may be recognized to speak. Also *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please be prepared to speak when your name or the last 4 digits of your phone number is called. Please state your name prior to beginning your public comment. Are there any public comments?
Are there any public comments in the central office? Seeing none. Any public comments in the northern region?
No public comments in the north.
And I believe we have no public members in the south. So we do have public comment on Zoom. First up is Connie Young.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you. So I'm Connie Young, a Fresno resident, retired registered nurse and volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby, also known as CCL. Happy Earth Day, and thank you for all you do to reduce the air and greenhouse gas pollution that makes us sick and fuels the climate crisis. Last month, I referenced a report on climate change impacts that was released in February by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or Ipcc. Today, I'll speak about another Ipcc report released this month, which summarizes the latest scientific research relating to climate change mitigation, or solutions. The following information comes from an article written by CCL Research Coordinator Dana Nuzatelli. The Ipcc Climate Mitigation Report emphasizes how important it is that Congress pass the strongest climate package possible through budget reconciliation this year, ideally including a price on carbon. The IPC authors agree that carbon pricing is both effective and efficient. Of importance to you, the report notes that a carbon pricing policy can yield numerous co-benefits, including improved health through cleaner air. The report also discusses the importance of coupling carbon pricing with rebates or dividends to residents to protect low-income households and ensure the policy remains popular. Pairing carbon pricing with a carbon border adjustment mechanism, or CBAM, would prevent carbon leakage and create a level playing field for businesses. A price on carbon would provide a key financial incentive to spur new technology innovations to help accelerate carbon emission reductions at lower costs. The IPCC report notes that now is the time to implement major climate policies like carbon fee and dividend. With that in mind, I urge you to use your influence on Capitol Hill to encourage Congress to include carbon pricing in budget reconciliation. The rest of us can also lobby the president and our members of Congress by going to cclusa.org/take action. That's cclusa.org/take action. Thank you.
Through the chair, I see no additional public comment on this item. Item number 6 is star recognition, service, teamwork, attitude, and respect.
Is this going to be Samir or Shanika presenting?
Hi, it'll be Shanika. Hello.
Hi.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Shanika Dixon, Director of Personnel. As you're aware, recognition of employees' contributions is an essential component to the district's STAR work culture. Today, we would like to formally recognize and show our appreciation to those employees who've reached a service milestone in the first quarter of 2022. So as you can see, we have a few employees here in person today. We also have some of our staff that will be attending virtually, and we will begin to bring them up. Here we go. Okay, I will begin recognizing staff in Bakersfield. We may have some staff that are attending in the regional offices as well. So for 5 years of service, I would like to recognize Thomas Aguirre, Air Quality Engineer, Josue Gonzalez, Air Quality Inspector. For 15 years of service, Renee Chavez, Supervising Air Quality Inspector, Nanette Diaz, Senior Office Assistant, and Eric Esposito, Air Quality Inspector. In our central office in Fresno, we have for 5 years of service recognizing Desiree Alvarez, Air Quality Assistant. 10 years of service, Annette Bellatori, District Counsel. 15 years of service, Anna Myers, Air Quality Specialist. Kat Tao, Senior Air Quality Specialist. And for 20 years of service, Jonah Ayube, Air Quality Engineer, and Manuel Salinas, Air Quality Engineer. Thank you for your commitment and your service to the district over the years. We appreciate your contribution, everyone.
Whoopee whoopee.
Thank you.
Item number 7 is approve enhancements to the district's truck replacement program.
Mr. Chair, members of the board.
I just want you to know that I've been talking and congratulating all the employees as my mic is off, and no one pays attention to me, just like my wife.
I'd like to introduce Mr. Chair, board members, Brian Dodd, who's program manager in the grant department, who will be presenting this item. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Brian Dodds. I am here this morning to seek your board's approval on enhancements to the district's truck replacement program. As your board is well aware, reducing emissions from mobile sources is a key strategy necessary to meet federal ambient air quality standards. And the emissions from heavy-duty sources, mobile sources operating throughout the valley, are primarily under the jurisdiction of the state and federal government. The district's attainment strategy relies on emission reductions achieved through the implementation of CARB's statewide truck and bus regulation, as well as reductions achieved through voluntary incentive programs, which achieve emission reductions that go beyond existing regulatory requirements, surplus emission reductions, as they're also known. The statewide truck and bus regulation was adopted by CARB in December of 2008, and its goal is to reduce NOx and PM emissions from more than 1 million heavy-duty trucks, diesel trucks, and buses operating throughout California. The requirements of the regulation became effective in January of 2010 and ultimately required all applicable fleet operators to replace any vehicles with pre-2010 model year engines with vehicles that meet the 2010 model year engine standard. The initial requirements of the regulation allowed for retrofits of some engines, while vehicle replacement requirements began in 2015. And to date, the regulation has required all 2006 model year trucks and older to meet the requirements of the regulation with very limited exceptions. By January 1st, 2023, the remaining 2007 to 2009 model year trucks will have been required to be replaced as well. And this table just represents the compliance schedule for Class 7 and 8 trucks. As mentioned, most trucks have already passed their compliance deadline, with the remaining trucks coming up to January 1st, 2023. And this is the schedule for Class 4 and Class 6 trucks, 4 through 6 trucks. There are some minor differences, but ultimately the January 1st, 2023 deadline applies to these trucks as well. The district's truck replacement program has been a key resource for retrofitting, repowering, and replacing over 7,000 trucks since 1998. In 2010, efforts to replace heavy-duty trucks drastically increased as multiple state funding sources became available. For example, the Proposition 1B Goods Movement emission reduction program was heavily focused on replacing and retrofitting heavy-duty trucks. Between 2010 and 2017, the district funded well over 5,000 truck projects totaling nearly $270 million in incentive funding. As final compliance dates have arrived, the ability to fund truck projects through our incentive programs has significantly declined, as the opportunities to achieve surplus emission reductions have nearly been exhausted. Between 2018 and 2021, the district funded approximately 1,600 trucks totaling about $100 million in incentive funding. Until very recently, the state funding guidelines for heavy-duty trucks had not been modified, to reflect these upcoming compliance deadlines, which prevented significant funding opportunities for heavy-duty trucks. In order to address these rapidly declining surplus opportunities, district staff joined efforts with other air districts throughout the state to engage in discussions with CARB staff on revisions to the Carl Moyer program guidelines for heavy-duty trucks. This process identified a number of changes that would be most effective in continuing our efforts to replace later model heavy-duty trucks with new advanced technology vehicles. The recommendations made to CARB included updating eligible model years, increased funding caps, and cost-effectiveness limit increases. CARB has recently approved the updates to the Moyer program guidelines and incorporated the recommendations from air districts, which will allow the necessary flexibility to fund truck replacement projects. The changes to the Moyer program include updates to funding caps, provided that projects can meet cost-effectiveness requirements. So for trucks meeting the optional low NOx emission standard, they can receive up to $160,000, while zero-emission vehicles can receive up to $410,000. And these funding levels are calculated for each truck project and would vary based on the cost effectiveness, fleet size, and annual usage. Small fleets of 10 or less trucks can receive a higher incentive than larger fleets or more than 10 trucks. In addition, the model year eligibility has increased to include vehicles with an engine model year of 6 years old or greater, and this is a rolling criteria. So this year, that would be a 2016 model year engine. Next year, that would be a 2017 model year engine that would be eligible for funding for replacement. In addition to the funding levels and cost effectiveness requirements that were modified, there were also some administrative changes to the program, which include flexibility to the districts in determining annual usage, inspection requirements, and the timing of payments to participants. With the changes now approved through the Carl Moyer program and available for use, district staff recommends amending the district's truck replacement program guidelines to fully transition to the recently amended Moyer program guidelines. These changes would allow for a significant increase in the number of fleets that are eligible for incentive funding and provide higher incentive levels to encourage the transition from diesel-powered equipment to zero and near zero emission vehicles across all weight classes. In addition to the recommended changes to the Carl Moyer program, district staff is also engaging on similar changes with CARB to the Moyer Voucher Incentive Program. The Voucher Incentive Program is a companion program to the traditional Moyer program and has recently focused their efforts on small truck fleets with 10 or fewer trucks. This program was designed to streamline the process of replacing existing trucks with cleaner technology by working closely and directly with contracted dealers and offering a simplified voucher process. There are similar programmatic requirements in VIP to Moyer that will need to be addressed by CARB in order to provide sufficient benefits to fleet operators as they transition to zero and near zero emission trucks. Similar changes will be required in terms of model year eligibility and cost effectiveness limit increases. And as mentioned, district staff is currently working with CARB as well as other air districts on this process to update changes to the VIP program. In terms of incentive program funding for truck replacement projects, your board has consistently placed a high priority on supporting efforts to assist Valley truck fleets transitioning to cleaner alternatives. The current fiscal year incentive spending plan includes up to $32 million in local, state, and federal funding. In addition to this, the district will be receiving another $12.9 million in state funding that was specifically designated for truck replacement projects through SB 129. The upcoming fiscal year spending plan contains an additional $30 million in recommended funding. With the combination of existing and future funding, we anticipate that there are sufficient incentive resources available to accommodate the expected increase in interest and participation in the program for the next several years. So upon board approval of these recommended program enhancements, district staff We'll update program materials and incorporate these changes into the truck replacement program. In addition, district staff will work closely with program stakeholders to conduct outreach and disseminate program information. And we'll also continue our work with CARB to ensure that these updates meet the needs of the industry as they look to convert to zero and zero emission technology, while also working on the enhancements to the VIP program. Those will be incorporated into the district's truck replacement program once they're finalized, hopefully later this year. And with that, the recommendations for today's item are here before you. And this concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. So starting out, I guess I know I've talked with Samir a little bit about there are literally thousands of silage trucks and trucks that are under 1,000 to 2,500 miles a year that need to be replaced. DEF compliant or used trucks are in short supply. So you use the word cost effectiveness and use. Is that based on mileage? How many miles are put on? Because how will these people qualify against a fleet that someone's putting 100,000 miles on it?
Yes, to answer your question, the cost effectiveness and the incentive levels are determined by the annual mileage that somebody would put on a vehicle. The way that we accept applications in our program is first come, first serve. It's not necessarily a competition between two different fleets. And what we can do is kind of work closely with each fleet to see what they could be eligible for under the program, to see, what their incentive level could look like if they were interested in natural gas or a zero emission technology vehicle.
You also use the term, you think there's enough money, sufficient money. If all of these trucks have to turn over at the end of this year, how is that possible? It doesn't seem logical to me if literally 1,000 trucks. I can't even imagine there's 1,000. There's got to be thousands of trucks that are low mileage trucks currently that have been able to go through 2023. And it doesn't seem like there's sufficient money at 50,000 if you can find a truck. Doesn't seem like it'll go very far.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, maybe I could help address that question. Definitely a big issue in the Valley and across the state right now. There's really two sort of major components of the truck rule implementation, and I think I just want to make sure it's clear sort of what we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. This recommendation is primarily focused on fleets that have already complied or will soon be complying and are going to be transitioning now to these near zero and zero emission technologies. And so I'll talk about the second sort of area, which I think is definitely a concern and something that we're aware of and are looking for some solutions on, which is these lower use or limited use kind of exemptions that are in the rule. There are a number of fleets that are impacted by that, and I'll talk about that in a second. Now, for the sort of bigger picture in terms of goods movement and the many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of trucks that are operated in the Valley throughout the state on a daily basis, this program would be primarily focused on moving forward with new technology and transitioning those vehicles in a surplus manner, beyond the current rule, which would require a 2010 truck technology. And that's why you're seeing the focus there on zero and near zero, because that's what gets you emission reductions, beyond basically the new baseline, which is the new truck rule. Now you're bringing up a very important point, which is the second set of issue here, which is the issue related to a lot of what are often very small fleets that there's a deadline that's coming up. They have been exempted for some time now under the rule, under a limited or low use exemption, and are now looking for options in terms of how do they move forward and comply with the rule. In many of those cases, they would actually be looking for even just a compliant truck, not even a zero or near zero emissions technology. And unfortunately, under this funding source, under the state guidelines, under the surplus definitions that are used in those programs, there is no funding available for those fleets. In fact, there's even bigger issues related to supply chain issues and the availability of trucks in terms of timing. And so we are in communication on those issues with different sectors that are impacted by this, as well as with CARB, to see if there is some opportunity for a solution there. across the board, in terms of, whether it's grants, whether, creative financing or other things that could be done. But even with funding, some of the issues there is with the impending deadline, even the used vehicle market for compliant trucks is a very difficult market right now because of the supply chain issues and just where we are overall in the economy. So it is an issue that we're aware of. I just want to be very clear that this particular program that isn't is focused on the Moyer program guidelines, which focus on surplus reduction. It's going to deal primarily with the bigger transition of the goods movement sector into these cleaner technologies, but isn't focused on that set of trucks. I do hope to come back to the board with more updates on that issue as we continue the conversation with CARB and others to figure out where that's going to go here in the next few months. That is something that we're aware of and that we're definitely very concerned about as well.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? I don't see anyone on the board. So I'm going to
Through the
go
chair,
to
I see no additional board member comments.
you. How about public comment?
We do have public comment here in Central.
Pretty good.
Okay. Manuel Cunha, East State Farmers Lake. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members and staff. Again, congratulations to the 5 and 20-year, 25-year staff at the Air District. Can't believe 25 years or 20 years or it's going. But on this issue, Mr. Chairman, there is some serious problems. 4 weeks ago, I went, and I think one of our supervisors in the Fresno office will know the company. Freightliner has 3 major companies, Bakersfield, Fresno, and Stockton. One of my growers has 32 onion trucks that haul onions from the field to the packing house. Those trucks are tier 3s in the engine categories. So 2010 and older or newer doesn't exist, but he puts on 9,000 to 10,000 miles a year. He went to the trucking company, and then I went down to the trucking company. It is 65 to 72 weeks before you can get a truck ordered in the United States. In the United States, Dr. Sheriffs, this is a serious issue for ARB to really understand, is that we cannot order a truck. The trucking companies will not quote a price out 72 weeks or 65 weeks out. They said they will not quote a price on a truck. So here we have farmers that are going to be out of a truck in a year, in 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, and nothing is out there. And to say to a farmer or even to an independent, go out and buy a zero truck, the latest quote that I have, Todd, for a zero truck was $575,000 to $900,000. And the delivery time was 2024. 2024, they might get it, but they will not quote and guarantee the price. So how do we do this? How do we take care of, yes, I agree, Samir, it's all, the money is all for the compliant trucks. The last area I'll bring up real quick, the logging industry has asked to deal with the forest that burned up because of poor management in this state, and it's not done yet because of very poor forest management. The logging folks have been asked to start moving logs with their trucks. Their trucks run out at the end of the year. So how do they get into a brand? They're not going to go buy no $500,000 and you're going to wait 62 weeks or 72 weeks out. And they're not even going to quote you a price. So that's even a disaster. So I'm greatly concerned about this. And I believe that CARB needs to extend that deadline from 23, 24 to 27 so we can get rid of the back. I mean, the production isn't there. We're having the same issue with farm tractors. So, and I appreciate Samir's team of trying to work together with us. This is a serious problem. I'm going to have the Port of Oakland here, Port of Long Beach, and LA on May 4th in Fresno here, the shipping companies that own the ships that call freight. And they're going to be here in Fresno for a meeting with agriculture. And those
Thank you,
issues are
Manuel.
very serious. So thank you. I'm sorry for the delay overtime. Thanks.
Through the chair, do we have public comment in the northern region?
We have no members of the public in the northern region.
Thank you. And I believe we still have no members of the public in the southern region, so we'll move to Zoom. We have Kevin Abernathy.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I really appreciate this being on the docket. I've been trying to get enough grease in the wheel bearing on the axle of this for quite some time. We are with the pending 1/1/2023 deadline. We have got a tremendous amount of low use vehicles, typically in the Class 8 range, Class 7 range, with virtually no ability for ranch to plant shipments. And we think we got supply chain issues today. They're basically putting us in a position where, and I appreciate Supervisor Kay's comment, that we're going to be breaking the law until we get caught, and that is not a place that we want to be. Some extensions on timelines based on the pandemic and so forth, and supply chain issues is certainly warranted. So I would certainly appreciate the district and others pushing CARB in the right direction on this, because we truly have a train wreck before us. Thank you.
Okay. Through the chair, we have no additional public comment on this item, and I would like to announce that Supervisor Rickman has joined the meeting.
Thank you very much. And I will say, this item, and I completely understand this item is separate, and I completely support this item. I don't want anyone to think that it's really bringing light to another issue that's out there. I think it's related, but it's not related, if that's okay. So if there are no more board comments, and I don't see anything on the board, I'll look for a motion.
This is Supervisor Pereira. I'll move to approve staff recommendation.
Councilmember Lewis, I'll second.
Member Pereira, Member Lewis, first and second. If you could call the roll.
Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Yes.
Mr. Couch? I believe he may have logged off. Ms. Fugazi?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Werner?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Item number 8 is approved launch of District Zero Emission School Bus Replacement and Fueling Infrastructure Incentive Program.
Mr. Chair, board members, just like to introduce Todd DeYoung. He's director of our grants department here, and he's going to walk you through this recommendation.
Thank you, Samir. Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Again, Todd DeYoung, Director of Grants and Incentives here at the Air District. I am here this morning. I think we have the wrong presentation up there. That's okay. You can It's not what my notes say, though. I'll go ahead and get started with some background while we're getting the presentation up. As you heard from Brian, reducing emissions from mobile sources is a key district strategy to meet federal ambient air quality standards. This is certainly an important element in the CARB state implementation plan strategy for the San Joaquin Valley. Emissions from heavy-duty vehicles, including school buses operating in the San Joaquin Valley, are of particular concern for a variety of reasons. The first, the valley's population of school buses is on average significantly older, there we go, than other areas of the state. Anecdotally, it's said that the San Joaquin Valley is where old school buses go to die, unfortunately. We've been working on that over the last several years, and we've made significant progress, but we're still significantly older on average than other parts of the state. These school buses operate directly in communities and neighborhoods throughout the valley. They operate in your neighborhood and in my neighborhood, causing that exposure at the neighborhood level. And thirdly, they transport children. Children are a vulnerable population, and they need protection from the exposure to these harmful chemicals that these school buses can emit. In fact, there have been several health studies conducted that highlight the significant health benefits of reducing children's exposure to toxic air contaminants from school buses. One key finding from some of these studies is that in certain cases, there's actually a higher pollution rate within the bus, inside the bus, than there is outside the bus. It's called self-pollution. It's due to some of the leakiness in some of the school buses, and some of the exhaust from these buses gets inside and gets trapped inside the bus. So there's certainly a desire to clean up emissions from school buses, and there's certainly a lot of backup documentation that would support that. And so because of these reasons, replacing the Valley's aging legacy school bus fleet to minimize these toxic impacts to children and residents has been a high priority for Valley communities for years. This is reinforced through significant board action throughout the years. The Environmental Justice Advisory Group that consults the district routinely and consistently places a high priority on school bus replacement each year through their process of recommendations for funding priorities. School buses is always very, very high on that list. And in AB 617 community engagement efforts, we have 4 communities in AB 617, and each one of those communities includes school bus funding as a very, very high priority within their neighborhoods. As a result, for the past 25, the district has administered several incentive programs aimed at reducing the emissions and exposure from in-use school buses. In addition to our local programs, the district has led several statewide efforts. For years, the district administered the state's lower emission school bus program on behalf of dozens of California air districts and CARB. More recently, we've been asked and have been administering $130 million in Volkswagen NOx mitigation funding for the replacement of school, transit, and shuttle buses statewide, again, on behalf of CARB. Based on some of the recent solicitations under the Volkswagen program, we've seen that we are significantly oversubscribed, and there is significant interest and demand for school bus funding here in the Valley. So for these reasons, the district is proposing to launch a new solicitation under the existing zero emission school bus incentive program. The program will provide funding both for school bus replacement and for the necessary charging or fueling infrastructure. We're proposing $30 million in total funding for this particular solicitation. So that $30 million is broken up into 2 funding categories. We're proposing $20 million for school bus replacement and then an additional $10 million for charging infrastructure. The $20 million for replacement will come from an existing allocation of community air protection funds or CAP funds, these are state funds, and they're included in the 2021-22 incentive spending plan. It's important to note that funding is available for use. This funding is available for use district-wide. This funding is not associated with an existing or future AB 617 Community Emission Reduction Plan, or CERP, and will not take away from existing CERP measures within our existing AB 617 communities. The $10 million in charging infrastructure will come from locally generated motor vehicle surcharge fees that are actually included as part of this year's incentive spending plan. Both of these programs, the replacement and the charging infrastructure component, will be operated consistent with established criteria set forth in the state's Carl Moyer program and Community Air Protection Program guidelines. So in terms of eligibility, public school districts are eligible. Those school districts that own their own buses. JPAs, or joint power authorities, that have been formed by several school districts are also eligible, provided that they own their buses. Private transportation providers, which is something that's fairly new. Private transportation providers that own their buses and contract with public school districts are also eligible in this program. Participants in this program must serve school districts located within or provide service to as a designated disadvantaged community or low-income community within the district boundaries based on the Cal EnviroScreen model. Unfortunately, as with all of our funding programs, no public funds are allowed to support any sectarian, religious, or denominational school. This is in the California Constitution that prohibits state funding going towards any of those types of schools. So unfortunately, these private schools are not eligible to apply. So in terms of project eligibility, we're talking about replacing existing yellow school buses with zero emission battery electric technology. School buses must have a gross vehicle weight of over 14,000 pounds. The new buses have to be similar to the old buses. They have to be in the same weight category. So you're replacing a like for like school bus. They have to have current CHP certification, which means they're actually being used. They're on the road. They're in use. They must operate 100% in California and at least 75% within the district boundaries for the life of the project. And then we're going to be scrapping the old buses. They must be scrapped in accordance with established district criteria. That includes things like cutting the frame rails, destroying the engine, everything that we can to make sure that these buses will not end up back on the road somewhere else. In terms of the charging infrastructure, the chargers must be level 2 or higher. They must be certified by a nationally recognized testing laboratory. They must have at least a 1-year warranty. And for this particular program, they have to be for private use. So these are only for school bus charging. So they're going to have to be not open to the public, which the type of the chargers that the school buses take wouldn't necessarily work for vehicles anyway. But these are private chargers behind a fence, specifically designed and allocated for school bus charging. So in terms of the incentive amounts for school bus replacement, we're proposing up to $400,000 per bus. What we've seen in terms of cost of buses, we've seen recently through the Volkswagen program over the last year, costs ranging from $385,000 per bus up to $415,000, $420,000 per bus. And the fact that there's no local match requirement in this program means that if you can get a bus for under $400,000, the program will pay the entire amount. There's no forced out-of-pocket expense in this program. We're proposing a maximum of 10 school buses per entity to ensure that we spread the money around as much as we can. These projects will be subject to established cost-effectiveness thresholds and existing eligibility criteria that exist within the Carl Moyer program and the Community Air Protection Guidelines. For charging infrastructure, again, up to 100% of the cost is eligible for the purchase and the installation of the charging equipment. We'll have a long detailed list in the solicitation materials of what constitutes eligible and ineligible costs. Obviously, the cost of the chargers, the cost of the design, the cost of the installation would all be eligible costs. What we're proposing under this program is that applicants may apply for at least one charger per bus that they're requesting, plus a limited number of additional chargers to plan and accommodate some future electric school bus deployment. And I've got a chart on the next page that kind of goes through that, a very simple chart. So if you're purchasing 1 through 5 buses, you can request up to 2 additional chargers. So 1 for each bus plus up to 2 additional chargers. And then if you're requesting between 6 and 10 buses, you can request up to 4 additional charges. So a total of up to 14 maximum in that case. And again, that's to allow for some future deployment of electric buses. So what we're proposing is that projects will be funded on a first come, first served basis based on the submittal of a complete application. So when an application is determined to be complete, it will get funded based on its submittal time. And obviously, like in all of our programs, applicants must have a signed and executed contract with the district prior to the purchase of these new vehicles or the installation of new equipment. Doesn't mean that these buses can't be ordered, but they can't be paid for and put into service before you have an executed contract with the district. What we're proposing to do, because we're proposing a first come, first serve program, is we're going to be doing significant outreach prior to releasing the solicitation. We're also going to be providing what we'll call a pre-application workshop. We would invite any any interested potential applicants to come ask questions and get information about the program. And we'll do that several weeks in advance of actually opening the solicitation so that they can be ready when the funding does become available. So with that, your recommendations are before you today. It would be to approve the launch of the program, approve funding in the amount of $30 million, and then obviously authorize the executive director to make any administrative changes to the program to ensure we're successful. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Supervisor Mendez.
Yeah, I got a couple quick questions for you. These electric buses, what kind of range do they have?
So it's getting better. We're seeing about 125-mile range, which we think is good for most urban settings. Some rural settings can still do that. The fact that these buses come back home in between the morning and afternoon run, they can recharge, so that does extend their range. So it's feasible for a good number of Valley school districts we've seen.
Yeah. The other question was, you talk about, I'll use the word leaky buses. Now, what year range were those buses, or do you have that kind of data?
Those are some of the older buses. They can be into the 2000s that we've seen some of the self-pollution identified. It primarily is the older buses, that are used fairly sparingly nowadays. Yeah, but we have seen that in the studies have shown that it does come into the 2000s with some of those issues.
Yeah, the low 2000s.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're significantly cleaner.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Director Fugazi.
Thank you.
I'm trying to figure out whether to call you principal, member, director,
Assistant
or vice
principal.
mayor.
Thank you. So my question is this, I know at least up in here, some of our districts have already acquired, the buses themselves, but I know it's first come, first serve. I'm thinking about some of the charging stations. Can those be applied for independently, or must it be the bus and the charging station?
Yeah, I think we would have an opportunity if you already had the buses to just apply for the necessary infrastructure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sheriffs.
Thank you. Wonderful program, wonderful work the district has done on this to get funding. So important in terms of a vulnerable population, as well as the air quality and greenhouse gas benefits we'll see from this. Wondering, again, there are a lot more buses out there than we're going to be able to replace. And many districts have found funding other ways and other ways of doing this. Before this program, was pleased to see that picture from Fowler Unified, go Fowler. It also a reminder, we're doing this and we want to help other districts do it beyond this funding. And I'm wondering about information we may be collecting about how the finances work, about what this does in terms of, because I look at, the money districts are going to save on maintenance and fueling costs. If they're paying a little bit for the bus, they're going to be saving money over in the first year. But collecting that information to share it with other districts that may be looking at this in the future.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just a quick response to Dr. Sheriffs, if I may. He brought up a really good question or point, and I think that's what's really exciting about continuing to make some funding available. And you're right, Dr. Sheriffs. I think when you look at the demand that we saw through the prior work with the Volkswagen program, and now with where the technology is today, and the growing interest by school districts to really look at this technology, this process will actually in my view and my hope, would kickstart a lot of interest, brainstorming, and preparation for what's actually to come after this program, which is, based on what we're seeing right now, there's potentially quite a bit of funding in the new state budget that's still working its way through the process. We'll see how that ultimately gets negotiated, but there is some funding that we anticipate could be available for zero emission buses. So if districts are thinking about this now, and I'm guessing that we'll probably see a pretty deep list coming through this process that we won't be able to fund, they're already getting ready for some new state funds. And we also know that with the federal, the infrastructure package, the EJA or the bill or whatever you choose to call the recent federal funding that was put into place, that there is a national program as well. It's not going to go far enough either. I think it's $1 billion per year over 5 years nationwide, and then that gets broken out by state, and then ultimately whatever ends up in the region will certainly be helpful, but it's not going to be, that won't be enough. The state won't be enough. Ours won't be enough. But I think that by building off the Volkswagen work and knowing where that program is now, where we've done what we could so far, with that effort, with that statewide approach, this will kind of keep the process moving forward. We'll get a lot of demand. We hope with this, it'll help sort of get, districts here in the Valley ready for some of the new state and federal funding as well. And we'll come back and report on this as it moves forward. Just want to note as well, Modesto City Schools is just one example of this. They put in a 30 bus order just recently, and they're actually the biggest Bluebird electric bus order anywhere in the state, right here in the Valley. And then when they did the analysis on their buses, and obviously you need a lot of grant funding to support the buses to reach this conclusion, but their estimates were about $250,000 a year per bus in savings and maintenance costs by implementing the bus. And also, what was really neat to see was you also reduced quite a bit of noise pollution. So for those that, like myself, that used to ride the bus, when I was a kid, just remembering how loud buses could be, having the big diesel engine so and the driver having to kind of speak over the noise and all that. These buses run really, really quiet, and so you get other benefits to the driver and the children as well, beyond even just the air quality benefit.
Good. Will we be collecting any specific information from folks who take advantage of this, again, in terms of maintenance, in terms of what they like, what they don't like about having adopted this?
Yeah, there will be annual reporting required for the life of the project, in which we ask information about uptime, maintenance, any issues with the buses that they've seen, annual mileage, and information surrounding those sorts of things. So yeah, we will start to kind of build out that information pool that we're looking for.
And the signage is important too in terms of public education. Getting us out there, letting people know where the funding's coming from in terms of cap and trade, and all those are key, important, helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Dr. Pacheco-Warner?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to comment, and I don't know if you, Todd or Samir, have any additional comments on that they are continuing to try to refine, to Dr. Sher's point, the state tools on, that try to streamline some of this information for people who may just be looking online before they contact us, in terms of the funding that's available and the type of vehicles that are available. So I know that there's some efforts there. And just wanted to comment that having been at the Modesto City School launch of their buses earlier this week, it really is such a feat to have that kind of record setting in the San Joaquin Valley. And I think it sort of demonstrates how much our valley can really lean into this piece, and just but it is going to take some work, because the vision to put all of these funding streams together to make this project happen was quite significant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Samir, I just have a couple of questions. Number one, with the supply chain, what is the turnaround going to be for
school districts that make purchases of these buses? And then the second question is, there was a statement about if you can purchase a bus lower than the 400,000 that's permitted, that the grant would pay for the entire bus. However, do we have any kind of a benchmark as to what a bus will cost?
Yeah, so right now orders, obviously are, being delayed somewhat by, global supply chain issues. We're hearing, it could be 12 to 18 months to receive a bus. Some have come faster than that. It really just depends. But we are prepared for, some time in between order and delivery and implementation. We understand the world that we're living in right now. In terms of bus cost, what we've seen through Volkswagen is that new buses are costing anywhere from $385,000 up to just over $400,000, $410,000, $415,000. So right in that range where there's a good chance, depending on the configuration of the bus, that a majority of that cost could be paid for by the grant.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Member Preciado?
Yes, the question that I have is regarding the funding for those buses. As you know, most funding is first come, first served, but is there any potential, priority for school districts which older buses and the ones that are really leaking exhaust or harming students? Is there any potential priority for those rural disadvantaged communities that really have one of the oldest buses in the Central Valley?
Yeah, let me take a shot at this. The question, just to repeat that, I think the question was, is there potential priority for the older buses, perhaps in some of the rural disadvantaged communities? I think the short answer is yes. I think that there is potential for adding, some extra consideration or priority as a program like this is considered by the board. So we are recommending, for example, to limit it to projects that only or that provide service to disadvantaged or low-income communities. But you can go even further than that. I think the challenge, just to kind of consider some of the different factors that may go into making those sort of decisions, would be that then program design, I think, becomes important in terms of first come, first serve, versus maybe having some kind of a ranking process, because I think then you'd have to, an eligible project that came in, you'd want to fund. Otherwise what you do is you gather applications up front, and then you maybe take a look at them, based on the age of the bus, or establish some kind of priority process where you have to actually rank them and then use that factor to determine exactly who gets funded. We're not recommending that at this point because of the sort of where we are in the deployment of these types of buses. We have other limits in there, the 10 buses per entity, the disadvantaged community requirement. Mr. Chair, I believe that Mr. Chair, I believe your mic is not mute. Just wanted to let you know.
I was talking about you. I was talking about you.
We'll carry on then, sir. No, just to wrap up my point, but I think that when we consider adding other requirements like those in terms of priority or other considerations that place certain projects perhaps over other kinds of projects, you probably have to move the program over into a ranking process. The other thing that the board could consider is you could actually lower the amount of funding or raise the amount of funding depending on a particular type of a school district. But again, these are the types of things that could slow down demand. It could create some potential other impacts in a process where I think what we're trying to do is generate a lot of interest from school districts. So it's something that we can also take a look at in terms of reporting back to the board, in terms of which projects were funded and what we saw for future sort of consideration as well. So there are different options here. If the board wanted to consider some extra priority, it could be in the funding amounts. it could be in the process in terms of priority and establishing some priority types of projects that would rank higher. That's not the recommendation at this point. I think with the recommendations the staff have right now, we do feel like we'll be able to focus them on disadvantaged communities throughout the valley and hopefully get a lot of participants by limiting the number of buses. Maybe that could be limited even further from 10 to a smaller number if you want to have even more districts, but you could end up with, you know, some limitations that maybe just continue to restrict perhaps the, you know, I think scale of projects. If a school district was going to install a bunch of charging infrastructure, sometimes they want to couple that perhaps with, you know, maybe more buses as well. So you could have some consequences to doing that kind of stuff that might impact the program in different ways. So I just wanted to let the board know that there are different options in terms of how to focus the program, and that's certainly open for discussion with the staff here.
Member Bessinger?
Mr. Chair, I've already sent the superintendent of Clovis Unified a text message about this. I think to Mayor Preciado's point, maybe we can give successful boilerplated applications to our more disadvantaged school districts, because when you have smaller districts, you have people wearing more hats. So you're not necessarily going to have a fleet manager or a finance director who may be on top of all this. So if we can, and I would certainly be open to reducing, well, you don't want to say affluent, you're more better funded school districts, maybe not getting 10, maybe they get 8, and open up for the people who are disadvantaged communities. I think that would be good, because they're probably most likely to have the oldest fleets, just from a financial standpoint. So that would be great if we could do something like that.
Yeah, just a quick clarification, Mr. Chair, for the board. So the program as recommended would eligible entities would be limited to those that serve disadvantaged communities as is currently framed. So I think to your point, if there's a further level of identification within that, which I don't really have a recommendation to provide at this point, because it's already basically disadvantaged or low income as far as the way the program is being recommended. But if the board wanted to consider something even beyond that in terms of maybe the rural nature or other aspect, I think it's certainly open for consideration. But it is recommended as disadvantaged low income as it stands right now. So there are some districts that may not be eligible, based on that recommendation.
Thank you. Dr. Sheriffs.
Yeah, just following up on those last comments. On the one hand, I'm a fan of focus. If we lowered the funding rate, we'd be able to replace more buses, prioritizing the older buses. But I'm going to take staff at their word, which is this approved launch. So I'm hearing some optimism that there's more money in the pipeline, high probability, so that this is a launch, and there will be other opportunities to fine tune, narrow the focus, get greater value for the money that we're putting into this. And that this is really an opportunity to generate widespread interest. People don't have to be too much in the weeds to fill out the forms and get in line. Developing champions. That's so important in a project like this. And we know that for Fowler, we know that for Modesto. If there's an individual who sees the value of this and is willing to push through. So this is a real opportunity to develop success and then build on that. So I'd be, although I'm all for focus, I consider this a launch and happy to support it as it is.
Thank you for your comments. And make sure everyone furiously texts their superintendents like Member Lewis is doing right now. So,
and just to reiterate, Mr. Chair, just wanted to make sure we absolutely will respond to the comments raised and the excellent suggestion by Councilman Bessinger regarding the outreach component and streamlining for. We know how strapped districts are, especially in smaller communities. So that is a part of the approach that we would definitely want to integrate. Just wanted to make sure it was clear that that's something we would be very interested in doing.
Thank you. I don't have any more comments or questions from board members, so I'll go to Michelle to see if there's any public comment.
Okay, through the chair, I do not believe we have public members in the north or south. Still, we do have some and no comments here in central. And it looks like, I'll give it just a few seconds, but I do not see any public comment on Zoom at this point. It looks like no public comment on this item.
I'll second Ms. Fugazi's motion.
Yeah, she's holding up the number one finger. Do you want to comment first, or are you making the motion?
No, move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Thank you. Go ahead and call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Bessinger?
Yes.
Mr. Chiesa?
Yes.
Mr. Couch? I see a thumbs up. Oh,
Yes.
there he is. Thank you. Ms. Fugazi?
Super yes.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Mr. Wheeler?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 9 is discuss public-facing air quality information tools.
Mr. Chair, board members, I'm going to introduce John Klassen, our Director of Air Quality Science and Air Quality Science, right? Who's going to walk the board and the public here through this item regarding our public-facing air quality information tools.
All right, thank you, Samir, for the introduction. And again, John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science. I'll be providing an overview of the various public-facing air quality information tools and next steps in our evaluation of potential enhancements we can make to our own tools here that we use at the Air District. So as you know, accurate and timely air quality information is key for us, and this is really important for Valley residents when we have extreme circumstances like wildfire events where PM 2.5 concentrations can be extremely high, ozone concentrations can be high because of those emissions coming off wildfires. And it's particularly important in these events that residents can take precautions to minimize their exposure, and we put significant resources into this over the years to develop tools to be able to provide that information to Valley residents in real time quickly for them to make some decisions for risk prevention. So connected to this, a number of years ago, your board launched the Real-Time Air Advisory Network, or RAN, and the accompanying Real-Time Outdoor Activity Risk ROAR guidelines. And this helped ensure the public, and particularly the Valley schools, had the most up-to-date air quality information delivered directly to them through email at first, and then to text, and then via our mobile device that we developed recently. Yeah, and just to correct the date there, this was launched in 2010, not 2019 on the slide here, to correct that date. So at the time when these tools were developed, these were the only public-facing resources to provide accurate, real-time air quality information to people, along with recommended activities for schools particularly. So this was very groundbreaking when this first came out. But since we developed RAN and ROAR a number of years ago, 12 years ago, there's been a number of other tools that have been developed since then that provide air quality information to people in real time. They also have their own recommendations on activities. There is increasing interest from the public statewide regarding air quality impacts during wildfires, extreme air quality events that we've seen in recent years. And we wanted to note here that many of these tools that show local air quality information, this is all being driven off of the air monitoring data being collected in the district's air monitoring network that we operate across the valley. So a lot of these tools are drawing their data off of the work that we do to collect air monitoring data throughout the area. And because of our core value of continuous improvement, our goal with this is to continue to think about all these tools that are out there, different recommendations, different ways to communicate this information to people, and think about how we can enhance what we're doing and make improvements if possible. So just a few notes here on the RAN network. This provides, like I mentioned, air quality information to the public instantly, real-time access. People can go on our website and view air quality data whenever they want to. It gets pushed to their phone, to their mobile device through our app. This was developed through partnership with UCSF Fresno and the American Lung Association a number of years ago. You can get information through email, text, app notification when concentrations cross defined thresholds for PM 2.5 or ozone.
And the RAN system uses a scale based on hourly values, just to contrast it with the official air quality index from EPA. That's based on an 8-hour average for ozone and a 24-hour average for PM 2.5, but we provide information and recommendations on an hourly basis through our RAN system. Like I mentioned, this is available 24/7 across the 30 air monitoring sites operating across the valley. This gives users information about what level of air quality is between level 1 to level 5 with their own recommendations. And just to give you a view of what this looks like, you're probably familiar with this, but this is a view of our RAN system. On the left-hand side, that's a view of where you can type in an address of interest, and it'll show you your local ozone and PM 2.5 air quality for the day. Then on the right there is a view of our app where it can show you the current level. Whenever you pull it up and look at it, you can see what the current air quality is for where you are. Just a few notes here on the ROAR guidelines that were developed along with the RAN system. The ROAR guidelines provide residents with specific recommendations on activities and how to protect their health when we reach different air quality levels. And this could depend upon the level of pollution, the duration or intensity of the activity that you might be considering, or the relative sensitivity for each individual to ozone or PM 2.5. And these guidelines really were the first of their kind. And since we developed these, other agencies, state agencies, other air districts have used our ROAR guidelines as an example for them to develop their own guidelines. And this is a view of what those ROAR guidelines look like. We make this available on our webpage to schools who decide to use this. You can see for each level from green, yellow, orange being level 1, 2, and 3 respectively, you can see the different activity recommendations for what could be happening at school, and schools can use this guidance to help make decisions locally on what they should be having their kids doing or not doing. Our Healthy Air Living Schools program also includes a very strong connection to the RAN program. Outreach to youth in school is certainly a top priority for the district. We urge schools to alter their outdoor activities in response to what's happening with air quality, to make sure that their exercise is happening when air quality isn't an issue and minimize exposure. We urge schools to communicate air quality information to parents, teachers, students, coaches, and administrators as things are changing. We reach out to K through 12 with all elements of the program. We also ask schools to adopt non-idling initiatives at their schools through posting signs, policies, and education. And then another important component is the real-time electronic air quality display, or the READ, that can be deployed at schools where you can view the current air quality information for the area. And just to give you an example of what that looks like, this is at Malaga Elementary School. You can see in the window there on the left, one of the... Possibly, yes. Yeah. So this shows an example here of what the READ looks like. You can see on the left-hand side in the window, one of the displays showing the current air quality, and school administrators and teachers can see this and help make decisions for school activities. When we have extreme air quality events like wildfires, that outreach is absolutely key for this. When these issues are going on, daily communication of the conditions to TV, radio, print, and other media is key for us. We issue press releases as needed when these events occur. We post social media updates to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Nextdoor, and other tools. We issue air quality advisories and alerts as issues continue to worsen, if wildfire smoke or other issues come up. And we work closely with the National Weather Service to post some of these. We do advertising campaigns, billboards, commercials, and we have our comprehensive wildfire resource page on our website that provides up-to-date information on what's happening when these issues come up. So changing gears now, talking about all the tools that are now available since the development of RAN and ROAR. Like I mentioned, a lot of things have been developed over time. There are a number of web-based and mobile application tools that are available, and they all take a somewhat of a unique approach. Some of these tools just use data from the nearest air quality monitoring station. Some do modeling analysis to try to estimate air quality in between monitoring stations. Some use low-cost sensor data to assist with their estimation. So they're all kind of unique in the approach that they take. There are also some differences in how that information is provided to people, either through the website. They may offer email or text notifications or push notifications on the app itself. They could have different air quality thresholds established, varying from one another. The type of data they display can be a little bit different, whether it's each hour they display the latest data, or they can display information sub-hourly. Some low-cost sensors can give you information even shorter than an hour.
they may have different health recommendations as well, and they may not be aligned with one another. So because of all these differences, lots of tools, lots of ways to show the data, lots of ways to interpret it, it can cause a lot of confusion for the public, for businesses and schools who are trying to watch air quality and make decisions on what kind of activities they should be undertaking. The next few slides just want to show a few examples of some of the prominent tools that are out there. This is the EPA Air Now tool that's on the left-hand side. You can see, you can check the local air quality where you are, and then on the right is a map there showing the air monitoring stations throughout the area. On the right, that's an example of the fire and smoke maps. You can see there are a lot more air monitoring points on there because this includes low-cost sensor data as well as temporary monitoring during wildfires. So this provides a lot more information to look at when we have wildfire events. Another couple of tools that are available that are gaining in popularity, IQ Air is on the left-hand side, another app that you can have to look at local air quality. On the right is a tool called SJV Air that's being developed here locally in the Valley as another option. And then, of course, AB 617, our own community air monitoring efforts here at the Air District through that program, which we've talked with you about a number of times. This is an example of what those pages can look like. Where on the left-hand side, we display a map of all the air monitoring stations that are operating in our AB 617 communities, and then you can look at information on the right-hand side, different pollutants, and look at concentrations on what's happening locally at the community level. Other examples here, the Purple Air website on the left-hand side showing all the Purple Air sensors throughout the region operating. Then on the right-hand side, that's Weather Underground, and this is just one example. A lot of weather websites and tools also include air quality information at the same time. And this is an example of Weather Underground showing local air quality. Another one here that's a little bit unique, the breezometer option. The tool here, this is an example of a tool that actually uses modeling data to estimate air quality throughout the entire region, instead of just different points. So this is a kind of a unique approach here. And then finally, another tool, the World Air Quality Index Project. So this one's interesting where you can view not only just what's happening locally here in the San Joaquin Valley or California, you can look at nationwide what's happening and across the world, looking at the differences in the current air quality throughout the entire world. So now thinking about going forward, there are additional opportunities we feel to work with stakeholders to try to reduce confusion with all the differing tools and options that are out there. There could be more opportunities to take advantage of what's out there, learn from it, establish better practices, look at the best practices and communication tools out there and make some differences with what we're doing here. So what we're recommending is that we work closely with health researchers, school staff and administrators, state education and air quality agencies, county health officers, and other key stakeholders to convene a working group to further evaluate all of the available tools and develop potential enhancements to what we provide here at the district. And within that work, we feel like there will be some key areas of focus as we work on this together. As I mentioned, looking at available information tools that are out there already, our app, Air Now, other prominent tools, developing enhanced guidance for general public and schools during extreme wildfire smoke impacts, reviewing recent wildfire smoke and other air quality health research to identify potential opportunities to improve our tools and activity recommendations. The ROAR guidelines, those could change based on the latest health research. Looking at outreach and communication practices to understand what those best practices could be, how we could use some of that here. And then supporting recent statewide efforts to develop more uniform guidance across the state on outreach and what to do in extreme wildfire smoke impacts. And as we evaluate all this, we will certainly return to your board with any recommendations as necessary, consistent with your board's direction and guidance. And that's it for our presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
That is a great presentation. I know I had the opportunity to go out to the Air Board's station in Turlock, and so my question, I guess, because when we were out there, we were talking about the accumulation of the Air Board facilities. I think CARB has some in the Valley also. They're constantly checked for quality control on a regular basis. And on one of my applications where I look at air quality, it's on Hamlow Road, and I know it's just on someone's house. So the of all of those that you just gave us, I was looking through, which one has the most data from the QC checked air monitoring stations versus people who just put something on their house that may or may not be absolutely correct? I think if you take them in totality, I think that they work, but there might be individuals that might not be as accurate, if that's a proper term. So which one of those are just based on R's and CARB's air monitoring stations, or are there any?
Yes, to answer that, some of the tools are just based on the permanent air monitoring stations, which is what we operate. Our district RAN system is based on the federal highest quality information through our air monitoring network. Air Now is an option where you can look at just that information as well, just the permanent regulatory air monitoring stations, the highest quality. Their fire and smoke page, though, also includes some of that low-cost sensor data to provide more information, and there are efforts to try to correct for that, to try to make it more accurate. But certainly a lot of the tools that are using a lot of low-cost sensor data without making an effort to make a correction, there could be some concern that is it really representative of what's happening in the area. So certainly some caution should be used to some of the tools that are out there. So absolutely a lot of differences out there, but go
I
ahead.
just want to add a little bit, Mr. Chair, to that. So the EPA Air Now app and webpage that's been developed, it's really been ramped up over the last couple of years. There's been a kind of a national recognition of the need for there to be better data. So this board has been light years ahead of the rest of the country and the state, and we actually still are. When you look around the state, for example, the guidance that the Department of Education uses here in the state of California is basically our recommendation table, is a table that the state adopted for statewide guidance, and no other air districts are really at the level that we are in terms of the way that we communicate with schools. So we start from a place of significant innovation, and our app, like John said, absolutely uses the regulatory network, highest level data. But the Air Now app has been developed, it has really grown over the years to include not only the regulatory data, but also has now as a separate portion of the same tool, this fire and smoke app that does have some of that lower cost sensor data with some ongoing discussions about how it's to be used. And I think as we talk about these issues, it's also important to talk about what the purpose of some of these different tools and data is as well, because obviously for regulatory purposes, there's a whole set of data and approach and all that. When there's an episode like a wildfire, then different data may also be helpful. And like you just said, Mr. Chair, there a collective look at perhaps that data, you can actually see some trends and maybe where the plume is going and some of the early warning in terms of where some of the impact might be. So I think the use of the information and how you can just sort of differentiating between different purposes of different needs out there is also important to note, where different sensors may be more or less usable, based on what the intended use might be. So, but that app is also going to be, our understanding is modified. It already has notifications, the EPA app, but it's actually they're going to continue enhancing the app to have even more notifications and all that. So one of the key questions is going to be sort of what role our app plays versus the EPA one. There's a state one being developed as well. We're going to have to look at all of that and sort of see, where, now that everybody else is kind of catching up to where we've been, where do we want to be as related to all these different efforts as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Dr. Pacheco-Warner?
Yes, hi. I think this is a great opportunity, and I'm glad we're taking advantage of looking at what all would best serve our region, especially with a working group of people like our health officers, who probably have the most public health expertise on this aspect. I would, however, before we get the report back of sort of where you land on some of this, it would be helpful to sort of have a chance to seek resident input, or perhaps working with some of the service organizations, service nonprofits up and down the San Joaquin Valley, or even schools, just to be able to get a sense of how sort of regular folk are thinking about what we're going to be leaning towards, because that for me is the end all thing. Is working groups will give us such great insight, and I want to make sure that what we choose, we also sort of have a sense of the work cut out for us to help the public understand the tool that we're going to be recommending. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sheriffs?
Thank you. And just following up on those comments, it would seem that the 617 communities would offer a great opportunity to give us input about what those communities are perceiving as the preferred tools and why. And also very important information on best ways to interface with communities to get the information out. So yes, thank you for your work on this. The facts never speak for themselves. It can be very confusing, and one of our responsibilities is to try and help people better understand all that information out there, make better sense out of it, to make better health decisions, because it indeed, we don't want to just shelter inside and don't exercise. No. We want to maximize people's opportunity to be exercising and getting out. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Member Fugazi?
Thank you so much. I would love to be part of the working group once I transition off the board, just putting that out there. But I also, as an AB 617 location, we just had a fabulous event this past weekend. So it was Easter, and we had on Saturday about 50 kids show up to our high school. And what they did was, I know it's going to be hard to see, but they built box fan air purifiers, and talk about being able to get the message out. So each one of the kids that helped build them then got to take one home. On them in 3 different languages is the reason why they should use this, because in South Stockton, we have disproportionately higher particulate matter in our air, and we have more incidents of upper respiratory and asthma cases in this area. So the kids, many of them walked to school on a Saturday. We're here from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and they were building these box fans. Then we have Earth Day coming up this weekend on Sunday, where the ones that the kids didn't take home, because they got to take one home, we will be passing out at Earth Day. But they were really simple, easy to do. We had students from UC Berkeley's engineering school come over here and work with our kids and explain the importance of this and how air quality affects their quality of life. And it just really was a huge success. And then these kids, they become then champions for our environment, going back into their homes, telling their families, then spreading the word out from there. So the more activities that we can do, the more opportunities we can to engage all levels of education, not just the little ones, not just our university, but the whole continuum of education. I think we need to take every opportunity we can to engage them, because I will tell you, when we did the event at our school for idle-free schools, and when my high school students went to the elementary kids, because we were a K-12 site, when they gave that education in the classes, and then the kids got into cars with their parents in the car line, the kids were like, "Mom, turn the car off, turn the car off. You're polluting the air." And then the parents were like, "What? Where is this coming from?" So, out of the mouth of babes, whatever we can do to, increase the engagement in our schools. Like I said, I am all team engagement. So please use me where I can best be, get a return on our investment. I'm all for it. And so I love this presentation. I love the fact that we are trying to use what tools will be best in our different communities. And I think AB 617 is a great ground for us to really get into our community. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is a little bit, it's related to this, but I'm just going to move forward and ask it. I noticed that on a smaller map that Merced has, it looks like a station or two. And I'm not sure if that's station number 4 here on the map. But in the Los Banos area, I don't believe there are any monitoring stations at all. And I had shared with Samir yesterday that 2 Saturdays ago, there was a large fire. I believe it was coming out of San Jose from the Home Depot that burned down. And there were high winds coming from the west into the Los Banos area, which more than likely carried that smoke into our area. I'm not sure how, further that smoke traveled, but is the district looking at possibly placing some other air quality measuring machines on Interstate 5, perhaps at the Pacheco Pass area, so that there could be some monitoring as to what's coming over the pass?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, a quick response on that. And I do want to respond if there's time on a couple of the other points that were raised, but just on that last question there. So there's a lot of different considerations, I think, when we talk about doing air monitoring. There's the regulatory network, which John had spoken about, and that's something that we co-run that network with CARB, and then we work with EPA, who audits the network every year. They go through a process with us. And so our network basically meets those federal requirements. And so when you're talking about, say monitoring at Los Banos or maybe up in, the North Valley, as it relates to that network, that network is already designed to meet the standards. And there are improvements that do occur to that network over time. Like at times there are extra requirements that maybe come out from the federal government, or the board may be interested in expanding it, for any particular reason, and then we have to make an investment to make that happen. It's pretty costly to run these different sites, and they're kind of like speed bumps. Everybody sort of wants one, in their area. So whenever there has been a need, though, we do return to the board for a variety of reasons. And that could include, for example, talking about maybe something on the west side there, as you've indicated. Now, the other side of this, though, is that you could also do research type air monitoring, where it's not necessarily part of the regulatory network, but you can deploy temporary monitoring. A lot of the monitoring that we're doing in our 617 communities, it's a focused monitoring exercise to really gather some baseline data, track some things over the course of working in those communities. So it's not a regulatory network, but it's extra monitoring that's being done. So to that extent, there could be opportunities, like you're saying, to continue looking up. Now we do have monitoring up in Tracy, Manteca, and other parts where there some indicators of sort of what's going on, and certainly the more north you go up in the valley, generally the cleaner the data is. Although there are certainly impacted neighborhoods and communities, as Councilmember Fugazi had discussed with say parts of Stockton, or So you might be referencing a potential research project in the future, because I think you'd be looking for specific things as well, that as indicators, maybe tracers as to what might be coming in from the Bay Area. Wouldn't necessarily be the kind of monitoring that we're talking about here as well. So that's something we can certainly look into and research that a bit and see if there's any potential opportunities for doing that. But we do have some, we have a robust monitoring sort of throughout. There are 2, by the way, regulatory sites in Merced County, just to confirm that with you as well. He did read the map right there. So I can have some offline discussions with you in terms of trying to understand, what your suggestion is, and whether there's opportunities for doing some extra work up there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Member Mendez.
Okay. I just kind of want to ask a simple question on the purple air. And it looks like that's what Weather Underground uses. Are those calibratable instruments or not?
Yeah, just a few notes on the purple air sensor and other low-cost sensors. They can't be calibrated after they leave the factory. Once you receive and start using it, you can't calibrate it. Difficult to clean, and so some concerns with them is over time they can drift and become more inaccurate. that's why there's a lot of effort by other groups to try to correct for that and make efforts to try to make them better after the data is collected. We try to correct for it, but yeah, certainly one of the concerns of those. Yeah.
Just wanted to make that clear so people understand this thing. It's nice to have instruments, but if they're not accurate, what good are they?
Thank you. I see no more questions or comments from the board, so I will go to Michelle to see if there's any public comment.
Through the chair, I believe there are still no public members in Bakersfield and Modesto, so we do not have public comment here in the Fresno office, but we do on Zoom. So we'll begin with Cynthia Pinto Cabrera.
Hello, good morning, Chair and Valley Air Board members. Cynthia Pinto Cabrera, the Policy Assistant with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition. Thank you to the staff for the work that has been ongoing into the efforts to improve air quality notifications. These notifications can ultimately save lives during bad air days. And we appreciate the efforts for collaboration and staff highlighting the various different air quality information tools. And ensuring that accurate data is presented to residents is extremely important. As the San Joaquin Valley continues to be the most polluted air basin in the nation, it's important that residents, especially those who are most vulnerable to air pollution, including pregnant people, people who work outdoors, people with pre-existing health conditions, children and youth under 18 whose systems are still developing and can be permanently damaged by air pollution, and those over 65, all these people need to be notified about all of the air pollution events that occur. And considering that this sensitive population is about half of the Valley population, it's extremely important. And while Valley Air has been doing a great job of announcing poor air quality days during wildfire, same efforts should be made during all days with high air pollution, along with improving communications and relationships with schools, public health departments, city officials, and Valley residents so that the most vulnerable to air pollution are able to protect themselves. Last year, there were several examples where Valley residents could have been better protected from bad air days with better coordination and communication. The first example being when California Classic hosted its 10th annual bike ride and run events in October in 2021, when the ROAR identified a level 3. And that means that the sensitive populations were at risk. And the second event last year was when the West Sequoia League Boys Cross Country Race at Woodward Park was held in November of 2021, where high school students were still allowed to run during wildfires and poor air pollution. So Valley Air must continue to improve its notification efforts to support the health and well-being of Valley residents, and well as have increased access to these notifications to prevent unnecessary exposures to air pollution. Thank you.
Next is Claire Statham.
Hello. First, I wanted to start with a shout out to Mrs. Fugazi. The activities that she described sound like absolutely fabulous ones. And as a retired teacher, I will say that the power of older kids to educate younger kids, who then in turn educate their parents, it's a very powerful chain of command. And I commend her for all of those activities. My interest here is about the gathering of the data from these monitors. Now, from my understanding, in Fresno County, a large county, many square miles, there are, if I am reading correctly, 6 monitors that gather PM 2.5 data. And my concern is the change that the district made in its RAN app some time back. It used to be that when you downloaded that app, you then chose which monitor you wanted to have data provided from. Now, what it asks for is your address. And I think that this misrepresents to the public the data that they are getting. If you put your address in, it gives the impression that you are getting, and the way the wording is also on the app, gives the impression that you're getting the data that is applied right there to your neighborhood. This is what's going on. Now, you're going to go out and jog right now. This is your air quality. But if I can use as an example, there's a monitor at Fresno and Garland, or First and Garland, and there's one in Clovis. And the readings are often quite different between those two stations. And they are, a number of miles apart. Well, imagine that you are more miles away from the Garland monitor to the west. What you're really getting, if I am understanding correctly, is the information from the Fresno, the First and Garland monitor. And so I think that in the spirit of transparency, the district should go back to having the citizens put in the monitor that they want to follow, as opposed to giving the impression that they are really getting the data from their address. It relates in some ways to what Ms. Lewis was saying about Los Banos not really having a monitor, but they can still get monitoring information. And we don't want to give the wrong impression about what the conditions are that people are living in. So that's my comment. And please, as always, correct me if I am wrong. Thank you very much.
Next is Tim Tyner.
Good morning. Good to be with you. Great presentation by John. Really appreciated hearing about the plans for revisiting some of the older work. Just for background, I was at UCSF back in 2010 when I worked with the former health science advisor, David Lighthall, there at the Air District to develop RAN and ROAR. So I fully support the plans to kind of look at what can be done, or do we need to update the ROAR guidelines. I did want to address some of the questions that members brought up, and this is going to be hard to do in 2 minutes, but the idea of the accuracy of these low-cost monitors, it's a valid point. If you take the raw data, they can be wildly, well, not wildly, but they can be much higher than what the regulatory monitors will show, but they are very precise. So even though they're higher, they correlate really well with the regulatory monitors. This has been tested by South Coast Air District, by EPA, and that's sort of why you're seeing purple air monitors all over the country. And CARB uses them, in locations that they can't put high performance monitors. But because they're precise, you can create algorithms when you co-locate them with the regulatory monitors to make them very accurate. So to say, yeah, you can't calibrate them like instruments, but you really can get very accurate data from them. And I think that's an important distinction to make. But not all of these public-facing platforms use the same algorithms, use the same processes to correct the data. And I think that's something, to be aware of, and to make sure that if you're using a certain resource that's not a regulatory monitor, that they are using the best available technology to correct the data. To some of the other points, I thought the question about Los Banos was very pertinent. Our organization, so I'm at the Central California Asthma Collaborative. We are part of the SJVR network. We put up a regulatory grade monitor in Delano Unified. To the previous speaker's point, there are locations where you're not getting RAN data from a local monitor. So Delano gets its information from Bakersfield, which is not always relevant. So we were able to get funding from CARB to put a BAM 22, which is a regulatory type monitor, in Delano. We then put purple air monitors all around the school district, which are calibrated to that BAM. I think it was member Lewis's question about Los Banos. We have funding from CARB to do the same thing in Los Banos Unified. So there will be a regulatory monitor or grade monitor in Los Banos. We'll be putting purple airs all around there as well. And I have other points, but looks like I'm out of time.
Through the chair, I see no additional public comment on this item.
Okay, I want to thank the public comments. Would staff like to address what Claire had asked about the hooking up to a local, an individual monitoring station?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, board members, I'll respond to a couple of things, including that, and then John, if you have anything to add, feel free to weigh in as well. But I just wanted to confirm with Dr. Pacheco-Warner and Dr. Sheriff's comments that resident engagement, school engagement, that's absolutely part of the process that we would envision in terms of talking about these issues. And so there's certainly a lot of great comments and discussion today, and that we build on that moving forward as well with the processes that we would use to really help guide looking at these issues. Also, just wanted to note that we definitely, it's hard to capture all the outreach that we do in presentations like these, but at times we do come back to the board with updates, especially around wildfire season, to talk about the things that we do. And I really appreciated Cynthia's comments, Cynthia Pinto Cabrera, regarding just the ongoing work that we do, partnerships with organizations out there to really enhance the outreach that we do. We do actually reach out to people like the folks that organize the bicycle race. Sometimes people don't call us back. We can't force races to be shut down, but we certainly try to reach out to folks and empower them with the information. And sometimes, there's other considerations that go into making decisions around these different things. But we're absolutely out there, working with folks as best as we can. And again, there is no other area in the state or in the country that actually interacts the way that we do with schools, with our health officers and others. And we actually provide a lot of advice to Sacramento. The legislature is actually looking at these issues right now through a process where we've been feeding them actually a lot of the information, that the lessons learned here, so that other regions can actually benefit from the work that we do here. So appreciate that recognition and the ongoing enhancements that we keep trying to make to that process. And as far as I just wanted to recognize the question, Mr. Chair, that was raised there in terms of these different considerations. There's a lot of different perspectives on the app and our app, its role, how it should be designed. I remember at one time, the concern used to be that it was too complicated, that you had to go in there and actually pick, different sites, and it was too much work to do that. Or could we simplify it and make it easier for that site to sort of just determine, which site you were, because you can actually put in a location, or it could just read your current location, and then it would just show you the most nearby data. So I don't think there's really an easy answer to that issue. I just wanted to recognize that it is one of those things amongst many other considerations that we should be talking about as we think about our app, the role of the EPA Air Now app, which by the way, also, you get a reading when you put it up on, and you don't really go through much of a process in terms of picking a location or anything like that. And I think, or any other app, you go to your phone right now and say current air quality, if you ask Siri, and it'll tell you a reading, and it's based on something. And so there's a lot of different things to consider as we talk about how to best share information with the public. Some members may want it a certain way, others may want it a different way. So it is an important question, and one that I think we need to tackle as we think about these issues moving forward.
Thank you very much. Member Lewis.
I keep pressing the wrong button. This is new to me. So I just wanted to make a last comment. I appreciate Samir, future conversations about monitoring of air in the Los Banos area. And I appreciate the comment of the public speakers who raised concern for Los Banos. And I know that generally based on the air quality that's being monitored, the north side, and we're kind of in the middle of that, tends to be less cumbersome than Central Valley going down 99. But I do want to say that occasionally, because there are fires up on the San Luis Reservoir and over on the Santa Clara side, it does affect Los Banos. And when those winds start up, which are often and through the summer, it carries down into the city. And on this particular day that I was talking about, the city had an Easter egg hunt, and the smoke was so unbearable that most everybody outside was wearing masks. So any funds that are out there through CARB or any other organization that can help do some air monitoring to assist the San Joaquin Air Board would be greatly appreciated. So if anybody would like to contact me, I would love to speak to you. And just as a caveat, I did speak to our fire chief the Sunday afterwards, and there was nothing going on west of San Luis Reservoir on the Merced County side. So that fire in San Jose was very, very large, detectable by satellite in outer space. So I can only assume that that may have been the contributor to all the smoke that ended up in Los Banos on that day. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So I hope you have I know this was just a discussion item. Hopefully you have enough comments to work off of. I appreciate Dr. Sheriff's and Dr. Pacheco Warner's ideas. I completely agree with them, as well as Member Lewis. Any other comments, or we'll move on to the next item? Seeing none, thank you.
Item number 10 is discuss district zero emission vehicle fleet transition.
Mr. Chair, board members, I'd like to introduce Ryan Buchanan, our Interim Director of Administrative Services, who's been working with his team on continually reviewing the district's fleet operations and looking for ways to transition to a zero emissions fleet. So we're excited to chat with the board about today. So Ryan, take it away.
Thank you, Samir, and good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. As Samir mentioned, I'm Ryan Buchanan, the Interim Director of Administrative Services here for the district, and I'll be presenting to you the district zero emission fleet transition. The district has always strived to be a leader in considering environmental impacts in the procurement and operational functions in order to serve as an example to other businesses and agencies. In 2012, your board approved the district's Green Procurement Sustainability Practices Policy, in which the district has seen success in a number of measures that have been implemented, such as implementing electric and manual equipment for landscaping at all 3 district offices, encouraging carpooling and ride sharing for district staff, and then in the Bakersfield office, the office building has an environmental energy design certified solar power system. And part of the green procurement policy is to evaluate the district's fleet in order to decrease the environmental impact of the operation of our fleet. Currently, the district operates and manages a fleet over 100 vehicles for enforcement, grant administration, air monitoring, outreach and communication, as well as other business functions. In 2020, the district initiated a pilot project of 8 plug-in hybrid and all-electric vehicles to evaluate the effectiveness through the district's operations. Of the over 100 fleet vehicles that the district manages, the compliance department uses a majority of these vehicles. The compliance department has been utilizing 4 of all electric vehicles during this pilot period and has found them to fulfill job duties, which include performing inspections and maintaining timely complaint responses. Overall, electric vehicles have demonstrated lower total cost to the district's operation due to lower fuel and maintenance costs compared to traditional gasoline vehicles. With the successful implementation and pilot of the electric vehicles, the district has established the goal to transition the fleet to zero emission by fiscal year 2025-26. Currently, in this fiscal year, the district anticipates on reaching 35% of the district fleet being zero emission. And here you will see the annual transition goals that the district has set forth to reach the zero emission fleet in the coming years. As we make this transition, there are some key factors that we will continue to consider. Impacts to the district functions. So making sure that vehicles fully meet district needs, including compliance inspection, responding to complaints, conducting outreach, conducting air monitoring, and business travel. Range and zero emission charging infrastructure. The district is in the process of expanding the charging infrastructure and will continue to evaluate additional charging needs. Supply chain issues. As many of you know, due to the pandemic, supply chains have been significantly impacted, which has resulted in limited supply of vehicles, increased prices, and delays in procurement. Vehicle operation and maintenance. Fuel and maintenance cost savings from zero emission vehicles compared to traditional gas vehicles will continue to be analyzed through this transition. And as mentioned, in preparing for this transition, in January 2022, your board approved 26 additional electric vehicle chargers in all 3 district offices, which will bring the total to 38 electric vehicle chargers. Now, the district is excited about this transition and will continue to keep your board updated as the district works to implement its goals of transitioning to a zero-emission fleet, and will share these experiences in implementing innovative strategies with other public agencies throughout the valley. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I just wanted to maybe just give a concluding thought on this. So this item was presented more as an informational update to make sure we were publicly, talking about what is a very innovative and a very aggressive transition to zero emission technology in our fleet, and also just to see if the board has any additional ideas or suggestions. This is something, as Ryan had just discussed, is a continual evaluation. A lot of the strategy really depends on the reliance on both vehicles and charging infrastructure that continues to be developed and made available. Our track record so far has been very successful in that the vehicles are working well and that we're able to get the job done across obviously a large geography. We just talked about how large the valley is in the context of air monitoring. So obviously, we have a lot of staff that are out and about, all over the valley every single day. So we are looking at this on a constant basis. We're excited about the opportunities that we're seeing in front of us and want to be a leader for other public agencies. And by doing this in this aggressive manner, I think we'll establish ourselves as a leader for other public agencies and really just show that we're serious about the internally with our operations, with how we look at what we do from an air quality perspective as well. And vehicles have worked well so far. So we will continue to keep the board updated on this, regular updates to the budget and other opportunities. And if you have any questions or thoughts, please feel free to let us know.
Thank you. And I think this is us walking the walk. I don't think there's any issue with this, as it's a natural transition as vehicles, as we change over the fleet. I just ask that you don't buy any Model S Teslas for staff. But other than that, I think it is that's what we need to be doing. And again, we need to show people that we're willing to do it. Dr. Sheriffs.
Thank you for those comments, and I agree 100%. Demonstrating walking the walk, and that we can do it, and it's so many benefits to doing this. I will call it innovative and I will call it aggressive, even though I would have loved to have seen us be 100% electric several years ago. But in fact, that's quite a timeline we've set. And as usual, the district has been very thoughtful in its approach to again, be sure we're successful, taking it a step at a time and working through potential problems. So really salute the district and its work on this. The one thing I would add is I would hope just as our STAR, we start the meeting today with a STAR system. This is something that we've exported to other entities, offered to them. And so I think we want to be sure that, we're not just walking the walk, but in fact that we share this model with other public entities, other potentially nonprofits with fleets, because it is, as has been pointed out, this is the direction we have to go, and we can help others get there. Thank you.
Member Bessinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question for staff. We funded 2 police vehicles at Fresno State. Did they ever get with us to do a presentation?
Not yet, but that would be a terrific opportunity to showcase that.
I'll reach out and bug them, because
thank you.
To me, it's a very public thing, and was my pet project, so I want to get it pushed through. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Pereira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair or Vice Chair. I want to make one point, just so that we're not misleading people. These aren't, even if they're fully electric, they're not zero emission vehicles. Even electricity, right, is produced, 60% is petroleum-based production, 20% is nuclear, and then 20% is renewable. So I just, I don't know, I guess I'd like to see us use the near zero term instead of zero, just so that the public doesn't get the thought that these vehicles are zero. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no additional questions from board members. We'll go out to the public.
And through the chair, I believe there are no public members in Bakersfield and Modesto. Do we have public comment here in Fresno? And I do not see any hands raised on Zoom, so it looks like no public comment on this item.
Thank you. Do you feel like you have enough direction from
Yes,
the board?
yes, we do. No, thank you, Mr. Chair and board members, for all of your thoughtfulness and ongoing support with this. And I want to recognize Supervisor Pereira's point as well. I mean, yes, there are certainly, it is ongoing transition there on the electrification sector, and which does continue to be, to be cleaned up. Typically, when you talk about vehicles, it's what's happening at the vehicle itself, and I think that's a convention. Whether it's a gas vehicle, electric vehicle, or it's what's coming out the tailpipe. But I definitely want to note that point. It's a very good point, and one that I think the state is going to be working on for some time to come as well. With the increasing power demands, and there's some bigger issues as well that I think we need to always keep in mind when we talk about these issues. So I wanted to recognize that comment as well.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to item 11.
Okay. Item 11 is report on 2021-2022 winter residential wood smoke reduction strategy.
So I'd like to just quickly introduce Jamie Hull, our Outreach and Communications Director, and John Klassen, our Director of Air Quality Science. They're going to be co-presenting on this item. It's a very comprehensive strategy that we implement every single winter to reduce residential wood smoke, and they're going to speak about what these efforts look like this past year, some of the data around how the winter looked, and at the end, open up some conversation around how do we continue looking at this strategy, and where does it go from here. And with that, I'll turn it over to the presenters. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Samir. So just go ahead and jump into this. As you know, there's been an extensive amount of public health research related to wood smoke and its impact on public health. The prolonged inhalation of wood smoke can cause lung disease, decrease in lung function for children, hypertension or heart disease, could lead to cancer and heart failure. And because of this is a really key focus for us during the winter season. Residential wood burning emissions are one of the largest sources of direct PM 2.5 during the winter months, which is why this is so key for us. And this can be magnified during the winter season when we have temperature inversions over the valley, placing a lid over the bowl of the valley. These emissions can get trapped near the surface in neighborhoods where it's happening, where people are living. So certainly a big focus for us. And in light of these health impacts, we've worked hard to develop our residential wood smoke reduction strategy. This is a highly cost-effective public health measure. We get large amounts of PM 2.5 reductions with a low implementation cost, and improves public health by reducing emissions when and where it's most needed in neighborhoods where people are living. Because of the effort we've made through our residential wood smoke reduction strategy, we've reduced direct PM 2.5 and its precursor significantly through this and other efforts we've made over the years. Because of that, that's helped lead to attainment of the PM 10 standard many years ago. It's helped us attain the 65 microgram 24-hour PM 2.5 standard just recently. And we're making significant progress towards attaining the 15 microgram annual standard for PM 2.5. And we've talked about this with your board a number of times, but all Valley sites are now meeting that 15 microgram standard, except for one single site in Bakersfield at a carb-operated air monitoring site due to some data issues and exceptional events impacts. So we're very close to attaining that. We've also made significant progress towards attaining the 35 microgram 24-hour standard and the 12 microgram annual for PM 2.5 through the efforts here. Just a quick overview of what we saw this past winter season in 2021-2022. We continue to maintain significant progress in improving air quality. Through our comprehensive program, we've seen reduced PM 2.5 concentrations across the Valley's counties, despite this being the fifth strongest average stability during this winter season. And what that means is when we have a stable atmosphere, that's poor dispersion, that's placing a lid over the bowl of the valley, and that can lead to some higher concentrations. So a very stable winter season in 21-22. We continue to maintain a high level of good and moderate air quality index days across the valley. we saw zero exceedances, 0 days where we exceeded the 65 microgram 24-hour level standard for the third year in a row, which is great, just highlighting the ongoing progress. We're not seeing those peak numbers that we used to years ago. And in fact, looking at the air quality data for this past winter, over 87% of the days across the Valley counties were in attainment of that 24-hour 35 microgram standard. So most days across the Valley's counties were below that threshold, which was great to see. Also, and I'll share a few slides on this in a moment, but speciation analysis of PM 2.5, looking at the different components of PM 2.5, show that we've greatly improved some of those key components that really drive our higher values, and I'll share some more on that in a few slides. This also includes us having a robust wood burning device changeout incentive program throughout the season and throughout the year, our comprehensive public education and outreach, and active enforcement and monitoring by the district. So this was the third winter season under our recently amended Rule 4901 that was amended in 2019. We're established some new thresholds that you see on the left-hand side for hotspot counties for Madera, Fresno, and Kern County. We have public education and incentive program enhancements at the same time, and this also put together new requirements for fireplace remodels, compliance during real property transfers, and enhanced visible emissions limits, and that all came together in 2019, the last time this rule was amended. Looking briefly here at the number of wood burning curtailments we had throughout the Valley's counties, this table shows historically what it's been like for the past number of years. The top part of the table shows what the curtailment numbers for the winter season look like before our latest amendment in 2019, and then below is the past 3 winter seasons. You can see how that has changed, especially for the hotspot counties of Madera, Fresno, and Kern. You can see those numbers higher with them having lower thresholds and us being more aggressive with those curtailment declarations. So because of this winter season being very stable, we saw an increase in curtailments across many of the counties. Looking quickly at the air quality index trends, looking at this, the green, those are the good AQI days, the yellow is moderate, and any day that's orange or red, those are days that are over the federal standard for 24-hour PM 2.5. Just looking at this, you can see the progression of how the number of good and moderate, the green and yellow days, increased over time, and the number of red and orange days have decreased over time. You can go all the way to the right-hand side and see that we had a very high number of good and moderate days together throughout the Valley's counties. And looking at this, just at the good and unhealthy days, specifically in this line chart, you can see that looking in the past, many years ago, over 20 years ago, we used to have more unhealthy days than good days across the Valley's counties during the winter. That's definitely not where we want to be. And you can see as time has gone on, those two flipped in the early 2000s, where now we have, looking at more recent years, we have way more good days than unhealthy days, which is certainly where we want to be and what we want to see during the winter season. An overview of the meteorology that happened during this last winter season, the months of November 2021 and then January and February of 2022 were extremely stable, very poor dispersion. In fact, the month of January of 2022 was the driest January on record for the Valley. Overall, this winter season was the 5th most stable, like I mentioned, so very poor dispersion historically compared to past winter seasons. But even with these poor conditions for dispersion, we still saw PM 2.5 significantly lower than what we've seen in the past, and this provides strong evidence of the effectiveness of our emissions control strategy. Just looking briefly here at the different months of this last winter season, that dark blue bar on the left-hand side for each of the months down at the bottom, we're showing for November, December, January, February. That dark blue bar is our average atmospheric stability for each of those months for the 21-22 season. That hash bar is the average over the previous 5 years. So you can see that for 3 of our 4 months, we were much more stable than what we've seen on average. And you can see how very stable it was in January and February, which led to some of our higher concentrations. We've continued this analysis. We've done this the past number of years, but this is again showing stability versus PM 2.5. And the takeaway from here is if you look at the blue bars here, that's the average stability across the Valley for each winter season. So if you go all the way to the right-hand side, that's the 21-22 season. You can see it's a pretty tall bar there, a higher number, signifying the stability of what we saw and the poor dispersion. The red line there is the average PM 2.5 across the Valley that we experienced based on our air monitoring network. And you can see that even with the higher stability number in this past winter season, our average PM 2.5 was still significantly less than what we've seen many years ago, even in years that had better dispersion. So this is just really clear evidence that even with a winter season with not the greatest dispersion, we're still having lower concentrations compared to what we saw many years ago. Now, looking at the speciation analysis that I mentioned before, this is looking at the breakdown of the different species of PM 2.5 for each winter season, going back to the year 2000, 2001. The two key components of this are organic carbon, that's the yellow bar there, and ammonium nitrate. These are the two biggest pieces that drive our wintertime PM 2.5, and this is like the big focus of us trying to get reductions of PM 2.5 during the winter season. So ammonium nitrate is driven by NOx emissions, and all the efforts to reduce NOx from mobile sources and stationary sources over time, that has helped reduce the ammonium nitrate portion. That's the dark blue bar. You see it is less now than it has been in the past. The yellow bar there is organic carbon, which is driven by residential wood burning or agricultural burning and other sources. And because of those big reductions we've seen over time there, the yellow bar has also decreased significantly over this time. So what we're seeing here is what's driving the biggest change in PM 2.5 across the valley is the big changes we're seeing in ammonium nitrate and organic carbon based on all of the strategies that we've had in place for a number of years. Yeah, and wildfires certainly play an effort in this, of course. When we have significant wildfire impacts, our organic carbon can be higher, which is kind of what we see in some recent years. You see that yellow bar being a bit higher than what it could have been if we did not have wildfire impacts. And just to the last few slides for me, we've continued this analysis as well. And what we've done here is looking at the relationship in PM 2.5 air quality and meteorological data in years past, before we had much of our emissions reduction strategy in place. We're able to develop equations and relationships where we can create a predictive model where we can try to predict what air quality would have been like if we did not have our emissions reduction strategy in place at all. And that's what that top dashed line represents here in this example for the Modesto area. That top dashed line represents what air quality could have been like if we had no emissions reduction strategy in place. That dark blue line below, that solid line, that is what was actually measured during each of these winter seasons. And the fact that we're seeing a big difference between the two, and we're continuing to see a big difference, really shows how effective our emissions reductions have been in improving PM 2.5 air quality across the valley here in Modesto. Similar analysis in Fresno area. And then in Bakersfield, we're seeing those same patterns there. So really great to see that ongoing progress. And I'll hand it over to Jamie at this point to give us some more overview of education and outreach.
Good morning. Key to our wood smoke reduction strategy is our incentive funding, and we have our Burn Cleaner program as a marquee incentive program for the entire district that really reaches out to residents and says, we want to help you in swapping out your wood burning device so that you can burn more cleanly. During the 2021-22 winter season, nearly 1,500 vouchers were issued to Valley residents and nearly $4 million was awarded. 95% of that funding is provided for natural gas devices. However, we do have a very limited amount of funding that can go for certified wood burning devices in those areas that do not have access to natural gas, mostly foothill and mountain communities, from when upgrading from an older uncertified device to a certified device. And then, of course, we do have the heat pump option, which we're seeing more people take advantage of. And that's to put an electric heat pump into your home as opposed to using a wood burning device. We also have ramped up the outreach of this entire program, and we have approved 73% of the vouchers this past year in hotspot counties. That's Kern, Fresno, and Madera. Since 2009, this program has issued over 26,000 vouchers, and we're knocking on the door of about $50 million in funding to date. Outreach is a key part of our wood smoke, residential wood smoke reduction strategy, and we really base what we do on public health survey, or public outreach surveys that we do. We did most recently a survey in 2017, and we found a few key goals that we've since implemented come out of that survey. One is increasing emphasis on the health impacts of wood smoke. wood smoke. We do that through a whole variety of methods. We want to educate the public and the media about the collective benefits and choosing not to burn, just not burning at all. And we want to encourage residents to upgrade their device. Finally, we want to make sure that residents are aware of when we do have, it's not often, but those periods during the winter when the conditions are really stagnant and we do expect air quality to deteriorate. They need to be aware of those unique situations and take steps to protect their health. As I mentioned, there are multiple ways that we engage the public. I will tell you, when I started this nearly 20 years ago, we really just did TV, radio, newspapers, billboards. Those days are over. We have a wide variety of ways that we reach out to the public. We still do TV and billboards, a little bit of radio here and there, and some print upon occasion, but we now have a whole new world of outreach. We do social media through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Nextdoor. We actually generate a healthy dialogue with the public. We do digital advertising, which is those streaming services, whether it's Hulu or YouTube TV. We're allowed to put, we take the option of putting commercials on those services. What's nice about that is we can really target them in certain neighborhoods or certain zip codes. We also do search engine marketing to individuals. This is when, if you're searching for something online, maybe I go into Home Depot and I put that I'm looking for a wood burning device. I want to purchase it at Home Depot. And then later I go and I'm looking for shoes. They're going to pop up right next to my shoe search that, oh, by the way, the district has a grant program for that wood burning device that you were looking at over at Home Depot. We also do some in-store signage you may have seen. We have a great partner in that Home Depot will periodically let us put signage up, be it for the lawnmower program or for the wood burning program in our retailer partners. And we also do in-store signage for our retail partners to make sure that anyone walks into their space will know that we have this program. Smartphone application we just talked a lot about. I'm not going to go into that. And then we do multiple press releases, usually in English and Spanish throughout the season with fair amount of coordination with our forecasters and our meteorologists up and down the valley. These are just a few of the examples of the outreach that we've done in the past year: social media, bilingual, billboards, lots of fun videos that we place on our social media and in TV up and down the valley. Just some of the statistics for this past season: nearly 37,000 public inquiries were made to our 1-800-SMOG info number. That's a number that's both an automated system that's in Spanish and English. 330,000 visits to the Check Before You Burn webpage, where folks can check the status of daily wood burning. We received over 400 public complaints for suspected wood burning activities. Each of those complaints we follow up on. Now, this next one, we have over 17 million impressions. What that means is 17 million times folks saw our outreach, either through TV, on a billboard, through social media, through search engine marketing. We also received over 20 media inquiries from the Valley regarding the program. Those were interviews that staff did with the media. Of course, we want to continue to enhance our winter messaging. That public understanding of the program has really allowed us to have better public compliance with the program. That's increased significantly over the past 20 years. Moving to that health-related message that informs residents that smoke from your fireplace really can be negative to your health, especially if you have some of those pre-existing conditions that John was mentioning. And instead of that check before you burn message, which was a little bit more passive, we've really moved to a more of a health-related message, which is a protect public health, please avoid wood burning message. And all of that came out of some of the surveys that we've done and some of the feedback that we've gotten from the public. We have active enforcement by the district. We spent nearly 4,000 staff hours this past year on enforcement and activities. As I mentioned, we investigate and respond to all public complaints. We have fancy cameras that, as I've mentioned before, I'm not super informed about how they work, but they use a low light imaging technology that's designed to really allow us to see what's coming out of a chimney in low to no light conditions. We issued 750 notices of violation. That is a $100 penalty. You can get that penalty cut in half if you go to our super exciting district smoke school. There are higher penalties for repeat offenders, but I will tell you for the most part, it only takes one ticket for folks to understand that they shouldn't be using their wood burning device, especially on days when they're not allowed to use their wood burning device. And we have increased public awareness, support, and compliance across the board, and the enforcement program is a big piece of that. Last but not least, I'm going to turn it over to Samir, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the things on the horizon for the program.
Thanks, Jamie and John. Your board has always, in the spirit of continuous improvement, been very interested in talking about the way the strategy is implemented. Obviously, it's one that touches every part of the valley. We're talking about residents who are over time becoming more and more aware of air quality, health impacts, but are also dealing with a range of other issues. And so it's always been very important for this board to not only get this report, but also as we keep moving forward with dealing with our air quality challenges, our attainment issues, and especially when dealing with the public in terms of education grants, the regulatory component, that we keep looking for ways to keep enhancing the program. And so this is certainly an opportunity for having some discussion around where do we go from here. We definitely developed a very strong track record of working with our public, a lot of great education, a lot of great movement in terms of the acceptance of the issue and really looking for ways to take advantage of our grants to move forward with other alternatives and really paying attention to these no burn days has really been remarkable in terms of that transition here in the Valley public. I think the awareness is certainly much higher than it's ever been. But it is something that we continue to look for more information on. So for example, we do plan on conducting some public opinion survey, and I'll call it / feedback process, because it may be some combination of maybe a survey with some focus group or other interactions where we really try to get a better handle on where the public is in terms of their opinions on some of these different issues. I think we can actually integrate some of the air quality tool discussion into some of that conversation as well. I think that is an opportunity for finding out from the public how they look at this, where they get their information from, and where they are with respect to different wood burning habits and what might resonate best with them here at this point in our journey, as opposed to where that was several years ago when we did the last survey. We also have been working very closely with our 617 communities to provide education in these communities and really learning a lot from working directly with the community in understanding what kind of resources might be needed to also assist with dealing with residential wood burning, which is an activity that can impact these and other communities throughout the valley. So that is a major opportunity and a big learning opportunity for the district staff that we're certainly gleaning a lot of good information from. One of the big things that the board has always really been interested in also is where we are with our grant program and where it really needs to be as responsive to the public as possible. Every year we program as an agency through our budget process quite a bit of funding, and as you heard from Jamie's report, another very successful effort there with the grant program. But we need to make enhancements to that program going into the next season and moving into the future. And so for one example of an issue that I think we may want to address and that we would certainly return to the board with is the fact that costs continue to go up. So if you want to actually install, whether it's a heat pump or natural gas device at your home, just like everything else has seen an increase in price, we've seen those prices go up as well. So if you're a lower income household, for example, or just let's just say a household, you're just having more difficulty in taking advantage of those grants. And that's something that we're looking at right now in terms of some recommendations that might help address that issue. It's a fixed grant right now that hasn't been changed in several years. So I think that is an opportunity for the board to weigh in and see if you want to make some enhancements there. We also want to keep looking at these technologies. Jamie mentioned the heat pumps, and there's certainly some growing interest there. We're doing more outreach now with folks that are involved in those types of projects, but it's still not quite there in terms of major residents within the valley. So we want to make sure we keep taking a look at these technologies and do that in the context of where the residents are. So we know, for example, that costs continue to go up in terms of, for example, natural gas, in homes. We know that costs in general go up. We also know that there are some great technologies that are coming to market. So it is important that as we think about our grant program and just in general, that we're always looking at these technologies and returning to the board with recommendations that are up to speed with where those technologies are. And the one area that certainly the board has been interested in, that we continue to look at ways for enhancement in terms of the approach that we use, is with respect to open hearth fireplaces. So as John noted during this last winter, we called no burn days quite a bit throughout the valley, but particularly in our hotspot counties. But it was actually pretty extensive all throughout the valley. We had a lot of stagnation, so we call it a lot of no burn days. Those no burn days apply to open hearth as well. So there has been a major reduction in open hearth burning activity. But it is one of those areas where we always want to be mindful of the fact that while they're relatively few in terms of the amount of wood that might be burned and the number of these devices that are out there as compared to some of the wood stoves, they actually have much higher emissions than, say, a wood stove does. So they're very disproportionate in terms of their impact to the overall emissions picture, and are very damaging in a community, and don't have the heating value. I mean, typically when you burn in open hearth fireplaces, it's more for ambiance than it might be for heating. So that is something that we continue to evaluate, and are certainly interested in presenting recommendations in the future regarding how to continue to enhance the approach when it comes to open hearth fireplaces. There are some other regulatory areas that we're definitely interested in taking a look at. The sole source of heat process that we go through right now, and other amendments. Right now, as your board has heard about in these last several months, we're working on a contingency package to deal with the Federal Clean Air Act requirements under our PM 2.5 plans. There may be opportunities as we think about residential wood burning in our rule to address some of those contingency requirements in the event that we're not able to meet these standards by the federally required targets. So that is something that just a short list, I would say, of some of the things that your board has been interested in the past, and in areas for just ongoing discussion and guidance in terms of where there may be some interest in looking at some of these things. And so all of these would require, whether it's an enhancement to the incentive program, or as we continue to look at our regulation, would require us returning to the board with recommendations. I would anticipate sometime in the summer, perhaps in the late summer, coming back with some recommendations on the Burn Cleaner program, for example, with some ideas in terms of some amendments that could be made to that program to recognize the cost issues, maybe some of the enhancements in technology as well, and other components like the contingency measure. We hope to return to your board later in the year to deal with those requirements as well. So there may be opportunities and certainly more discussion on issues like the regulatory approach in the context of contingency. And I'll leave it there. It really is an open discussion. There is no formal action today in any of these areas. We're just looking for some ideas, and if you have any direction that you'd like us to work through, this is a great opportunity for having that discussion. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair and board members, for discussion.
Thank you very much. Are there any board member questions? I don't see anyone. Looks like, Samir, you covered everything, all of our thoughts and processes, and Jamie and John. All right, so I'm going to go to the public since there are no questions from the board.
Through the chair, I believe there's still no public members in Modesto and Bakersfield. Looks like we have no comment here in Fresno, but we do have comment on Zoom. So we'll start with Claire Statham.
Good morning again. Claire Statham, Fresno resident. The report just presented highlights the district's success at reducing residential wood smoke. At the same time, it acknowledges that, quote, residential wood burning is one of the valley's largest sources of directly emitted PM 2.5 during the winter months. This report also does not mince words in stating on pages 14 and 15 the negative health effects of breathing wood smoke. The report draws the conclusion that, quote, the studies referenced demonstrate the importance of reducing wood burning emissions to improve public health. I concur 100%. In the section looking ahead on page 28, the district commits to considering options for further reducing open hearth burning activity and actions to disable these types of fireplaces. It is that bullet point I wish to address. I have in the past advocated that the district amend Rule 4901 to require that fireplaces be disabled when a house is sold. Many options exist for disabling fireplaces, but one method I think might best achieve the district's purpose consists of inserting insulation in this chimney and atop the chimney affixing a metal plate with silicone. There are several advantages to this method over the one currently required by the district if one is applying for a heat pump rebate. These advantages are low cost for the seller, no rebate costs for the district, the ease of completing the process, and should a future homeowner wish to install a natural gas fireplace insert, the disabling can, but not without effort and expense, be reversed so the chimney can be used for venting. If reversibility makes this method unacceptable to the district, it can opt for the method it now requires to claim a heat pump rebate. Crafting the best process and verification method may present challenges to the district, but as one district employee recently said, when it comes to PM 2.5 reduction, all the low-hanging fruit has been picked. True words. There is no easy path forward. The district must confront the problem of thousands of houses where fireplaces have the potential of polluting the winter air we breathe. I end with two passages from today's report, with the comment that, in my opinion, the words can be should have been replaced with the words are. First passage, people can be exposed to wood smoke when they use their wood-burning devices. Additionally, people can be exposed to wood smoke when people in their neighborhoods use their wood-burning devices. Windows and doors cannot keep the particles in wood smoke out of homes. And passage 2, studies have also found that wood smoke is 12 times more carcinogenic than an equal concentration of cigarette smoke. The district itself gives us all the information we need to know it is time to further amend Rule 4901. Thank you.
Okay, through the chair, I see no additional public comment on this item.
Okay, still no board comment, so.
I'll make a
Jamie.
comment. I'm just looking forward to Jamie and John giving us a rendition of the Platter song, When Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, adding a line about with passion to reduce residential wood smoke, you must realize smoke gets in your eyes.
Thank you. It's good.
Okay.
It's a good
Item
song reference. I love it. All right,
Item
next
number
item.
12. Item number 12 is verbal report on California Air Resources Board activities.
Hi, yes, thank you. Thank you. I want to give you a little bit of information about two important upcoming items. Right now we are, CARB in collaboration with other state agencies is updating the AB 32 climate change scoping plan, which in addition to assessing the progress towards SB 32's target of reducing greenhouse gas, sets out a path to carbon neutrality by 2045. Yesterday, there was a workshop and CARB did reveal the modeling that the CARB staff revealed the modeling that they are recommending. And so really the next couple of months will be a lot of community engagement opportunities from local jurisdictions, industry on this model, and there will be hearings on it this summer and into the fall, with the first hearing being in June. But before then, in June, we will also have another very important report, first hearing of the proposed amendments for the low emission vehicle regulation and zero emission vehicle regulation and associated test procedures, which is known as Advanced Clean Cars 2. The regulation, among other things, sets the path for the how California will set its goals for private vehicles to be targeted in terms of the sale of zero emission vehicles versus other type of vehicles. So that engagement is ongoing, and the first hearing of that is June 9th as well. So June will be a very busy month for CARB, but there's a lot of
community engagement opportunities. This upcoming meeting, in sort of like preparation for some of this that's going to be happening next week, the meeting is solely dedicated to the electric vehicle standards, equipment standards regulation and infrastructure update. And so we'll be hearing from a variety of state agencies on how that infrastructure is coming along and what are the barriers and opportunities for that infrastructure. So I do recommend, particularly those of you in rural areas, but really everybody around the San Joaquin Valley, to be engaged in that process of understanding where the infrastructure is and where the opportunities lay as these regulations move forward this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for Dr. Pacheco-Warner? All right, on to the next item.
Okay, item number 13 is Executive Director APCO comments.
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Just a few updates here. First, just for the public and the board members, wanted to wish everybody tomorrow a happy Earth Day. It is quite a busy time for us in terms of partnership and outreach. We're working with a number of different organizations throughout the valley to be out there and celebrate Earth Day and provide information about the various grants and other opportunities and information around air quality and public health as a part of all these different. We have events up and down the valley that we're participating in, and it's actually been throughout the week and into the weekend as well. I just wanted to wish everybody a happy Earth Day. And then May 2nd through the 5th, just an announcement, is National Air Quality Awareness Week. So I want to make sure this was on everybody's calendar. And again, we are a part of a variety of different outreach events in partnership with other organizations, including ride and drive events and other things that are going on as part of that as well. So just wanted to note those two things. And then lastly, wanted to make sure that you had seen that the American Lung Association had released their State of the Air report, release was, or I guess today is going to be released. Yeah, there was some discussion around this yesterday. There was a bit of media around it. It is a tough grading methodology that they use. Many of the counties throughout the state basically receive, some very low grades, particularly due to the wildfire impacts that we've seen recently have really driven PM and ozone numbers up across the state. But they're on the positive front, there is recognition that there is ongoing progress as well. And it is a report that is pretty, highly noted kind of across the country, and want to just make sure the board and the public were aware of it, and that the wildfire issues are something that we'll continue to have to address, as was discussed with several of the prior items, as something that's becoming quite an important topic during the growing wildfire season. Just wanted to end on that note and wish you all a great rest of April.
Perfect. Any questions for Samir? Seeing none, we'll go to the next item.
Okay, item 14 is Governing Board Member comments.
Member Bessinger.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two items. Did we have anything to do with Fresno State's? They took out a bunch of their orchards, and I just went by it this morning. It's all chipped. Did we play a role in that at all?
I'm not too sure. I can check into it. I also have seen they're transitioning, I think, to some other crops. But yeah, I'm happy to get back to you.
It was very encouraging because if we had a role in that, and we could talk about the fact that because we're not burning those things, there are 4 schools very close to that, to include Fresno State, and it's very close to neighborhoods, and it's actually about a block and a half from where my grandchildren live. So I'm very happy to see that. When we were talking about item 7, the district's the carb truck replacement program, and there was a public comment from somebody in the industry, and Mr. Cunha came up and talked about it, about extending the timeline. Is that a CARB thing? Is that something we need to go through the legislative process on? Because I was actually a little disturbed by the comment from the industry that, well, we'll just do it until we get cited, and we'll continue until they stop. Kind of going along with Dr. Sheriff's, the song "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes." There's a song called "Riding Dirty," and the lyrics are, "They're trying to catch me riding dirty." And if we're putting the industry in a situation where a seldom used vehicle has to be replaced, and they don't even know how much that seldom used vehicle is going to cost. I mean, I don't think anybody in this room would buy a vehicle sight unseen and not knowing how much it's going to cost, and then have to worry about, well, I'm not going to be able to get it for, 2 years, and it'll be past this. So we're kind of regulating people into being, well, criminals is probably the wrong word, but out of compliance. And I just don't think that's fair. Is this a regulatory thing, or do we have to go through the legislative process?
It's definitely the root of the issue is the truck and bus regulation that was adopted by CARB, and it's been in place for some time. And there was actually some litigation associated with that regulation that dealt with some of the issues, and ultimately the rule is where it is now. As you heard a lot about today, there's a requirement that is phasing out for a number of these trucks by the end of this year. Now, in terms of the solution for it, it definitely is a state issue. From a regulatory process, it takes time to change a regulation. So I think that would be the one thing that would. I'm just thinking out loud here, but in terms of the way the state may want to approach these concerns, there's a regulatory component, there may be a legislative component, maybe there's a funding component, but I think the reality is that the truck issue in terms of supply chain availability and cost is a major problem under any of these circumstances. So I think what we've been trying to do is just make sure that we understand as much as we can, being a local agency, what some of these different issues are, and are just trying to communicate that to whoever we can at the state level, so that they're at least aware of what's going on, and hopefully, as this becomes more of an awareness issue at the state level, they can start thinking about solutions to really meet the goals of what the rule is, which is to transition these vehicles into cleaner technologies, but provide a feasible way for that to happen.
It almost feels like you get into the unicorn tiers concept where, we're going to run these on unicorn tiers. Well, they don't exist. If we can't get the vehicles, we're basically telling a lot of industries that they're forced to flaunt the law, and that really is a slippery slope. So I reviewed the email you sent the other day about the advocacy for certain positions. There was a couple of bills going through. Is that something? Do we start there? And I guess maybe Dr. Pacheco-Warner can respond to some of the CARB stuff. How can we make this happen so that these people aren't feeling like they're under the boot of an unfair regulation?
Just going to wait a moment to see if Dr. Pacheco-Warner is still on to provide maybe the CARB perspective, but I can weigh in a bit on that. Just I think with respect to what this board may want to do with this, my general understanding in terms of board direction on this would be to number one, recognize the issue, which is certainly something that we've been hearing and are looking for ways to help in terms of transitioning these trucks over to other technology, but do it in a feasible way. Outside of that, it really is a state issue. It's a state rule. It's not only is there a rule, there's also some related legislation that is enforcing this rule under SB 1. Part of the issue here is that you can't actually register a non-compliant truck, past each of these different compliance deadlines. So there's very strong enforcement of that aspect of the rule. And so I think at the very least, there needs to be a very serious conversation about how we really assist, now that we're in this final leg of the rule, make sure the CARB and other agencies at the state level are just aware of this and are working on this issue. Now, beyond that, I'm not sure what other positions the board may want to take, and within our jurisdiction, within our mission, what else there is to it. It is these reductions are part of our SIP. We're relying on these as part of our attainment plans. So what I'd be interested in, my recommendation would be to find a way to make this transition happen as fast as possible in a feasible way, and for the state to just be aware of these issues and for us to be brainstorming what some solutions might be. And I think we can pull together. There are folks out there in the sectors that are impacted by this, along with folks at CARB and others that I think should really just be sitting around a table and ultimately talking about, what are some solutions to addressing the issue.
Yeah, and if I can add, this is, as Samir pointed out, this regulation was not come up with yesterday. This 2008. There's a long history, and you've mentioned a number of the complexities of implementing it and changing it, potentially changing it at this point. And there's also the added complexity of, fairness to the people who have complied on time, who looked at that 2008 lead time and have stepped up and put significant economic investment into being compliant. So it's very important points and very complicated to see how to be helpful.
I can just foresee a situation where if a grower or a trucker is forced into a situation where they can't register their vehicles, either they're going to be avoiding the inspection stations, which isn't easy to do, which is going to also cause the commercial enforcement from the CHP to become having to get a lot more aggressive. And then then we're potentially going to be taking jobs away from people who don't have a dog in the fight, the truckers. And if there are additional costs, fines and things like that, that's just going to get passed on to the consumer. So I don't know what the resolution here is, and this is kind of why I'm throwing it out. I don't know if this should be an agenda item, Mr. Chair, to discuss, at the very least, letting CARB know, if they're the people we need to start with, that this is an issue that, and I understand the fairness issue here for people who complied, but if you can't get the truck and you don't know how much it's going to cost, well, why would you? I mean, I wouldn't. No, but that's all I have. Thank you,
Mr. Chair, board members. If just sensing the interest in this issue, I think it is something that as we keep learning more about it and interact with CARB and others, we're happy to report back on this issue. I think it is something, I'm not sure exactly which month and in what format, but it is something I think, just based on the level of questions and interests that are being raised here today, that we'd be happy to come back with some further information on as it develops, and hopefully there's paths that are created. I don't think there's an easy one, just based on what I see in terms of where we are with truck availability and funding and some of the other issues. But it is something that we'll be paying attention to, and I could return to the board with more information on that and brief the board on that in some form. And I'll work with the chair and see what the timing of that might look like.
Thank you very much. Member Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say to the board members in Fresno and those that are online and to the public, this is my first in-person meeting since I was appointed to the board. And it's been really, really nice here with my fellow board members and with the staff that's available. Next month, I'll have to be at the meeting for a partial period of time online, because it is the same day that Los Banos has scheduled its groundbreaking ceremony for our new police department. And as a council member, I need to be there. I'm really happy about our new police department that's going to be erected. But I will be back in June, so I just wanted to let everybody know it's been nice to be here in a meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That's very exciting. Congratulations on that. Member Preciado?
Show my support for Mr. Senior's concerns, and I also would like to ask the mayor and the staff to maybe have bring this back to the agenda, like he mentioned, bring more information. It is, I believe, an extension. It is something that is needed at this time. Not necessarily looking at change a lot of things, but I think we should look into, if it's possible. I believe the board needs to have a conversation with, with CARV and see if there's anything that can be done at this time. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Seeing no more board members, I just wanted to say, I know earlier I didn't have my mic on, but to the staff who received the star recognition, I continue to be extremely impressed with the staff members at the Air Board. The amount of information and the quality of the information is just outstanding. So I just always like to, when people do good things, they need to be recognized, and I think it's fantastic what's happening here at the Air Board. So with that, if there are no more comments, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.